is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Israel ratchets up offensives in Lebanon and Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr on assignment with the Detroit Lions. Lisa Mateo with us. Psyched for Moana tomorrow.
Oh, boy. Yep.
I got home. They said, can you stop doing Moana? So we did it yesterday.
Right,
was our Moana day. We'll move on from that right now. We say good morning to all of you. Markets on the move. And the news overnight and late night news. Paul was in the beauty rest.
Yep.
When we saw tariff chat,
Sure.
We both said to Nathan moments ago, American markets resilient this morning over Canada, Mexico, and blowing up the new NAFTA.
Exactly. So, I mean, these tariffs are going against our top trading partners, Mexico, Canada, as well as China. So we'll have to see what that really means for markets. Right now we have, as Nathan's been reporting this morning, we've got futures just slightly higher.
You know, economic data today, there's a nice list, a wall of economic data tomorrow, squeezing in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Some housing data today. How's the housing market?
There's no supply. No supply. I mean, you know, it's...
there's no listings.
No listings because, I mean, you're sitting on... I mean, well, Alex Steele is sitting on her 2 3/4 mortgage. She's not going to go buy a new place and pay 6 or 7% on a mortgage. So she's representative, I think, most people out there.
Yeah, my mortgage is 9.6%. That worked out. Sam Stovall is going to be with us in a moment. We want to talk to him about triple leverage cash and the urge to get into the market. We welcome all of you in your commute across the nation. 92.9 FM Boston, down to 99.1 FM in Washington, D.C. Good morning. Across the nation, worldwide on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and of course, at home. At your office, building out. We're all new. Paul and I are cutting edge digital. Do you feel like, you know, I thought YouTube was a joke, and it's like ginormous.
It is a huge part of the Alphabet/Google story. I mean, in terms of valuation there. So it's just amazing.
And you know, we're studying it each and every day. Thank you for subscribing. Go to YouTube, Bloomberg Podcast, and subscribe. We're there right now, live. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures advancing, and this despite, like you said, President-elect Donald Trump threatening an additional 10% tariffs on goods from China, 25% on all products from Canada and Mexico. And that news actually sent shares of Stellantis and Nissan. They're both down more than 3%. They both produce vehicles in Mexico. There's also reports that Nissan plans to cut production in the U.S. The Canadian dollar slumped to a 4-year low. The peso traded close to its weakest since 2022. And Chinese yuan edged lower offshore. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index right now is up about 0.1%. So let's get to the futures. NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 56 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 74 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 12 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.26%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that's up 1 basis point. And so much for 100,000. Bitcoin now down nearly 1.5% at 92,000. Let's go to shares of Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly. They're both up more than 1%. Word that weight loss drugs would be covered by U.S. government. This is under a new Biden administration proposal. And we have a ton of earnings on tap for today. Best Buy just coming in right now. It's adjusted EPS missed estimates. Its shares are down by more than 7%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. We have a lot of equity we're looking at today. How are you repositioning for 2025? How'd you do this year as well? Sam Stovall, tons of expertise on this, chief investment strategist, CFRA, of course, stars. It's a 4-star stock. It's a 5-star stock. Sam Stovall, how have you done this year? When you look back on 2024, can you say CFRA got it done?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, I would say we got it done. We have 100 analysts around the globe that are covering regional stocks, large, mid, small in the U.S. and overseas. And we look to both momentum as well as valuations, looking particularly at a GARP approach. So we actually have done pretty well this year.
Is Mag 7 going to be GARPy? That's CFA talk, CFA level 4. Yep. Sam Stovall, is Mag 7 going to be GARPy in 2025?
Well, we think it will because we're looking at 20% growth rates for the tech sector in 2025 and a similar growth expected for 2026. And right now, essentially, the analysts are focusing more on 26 than they are even on 2025. So the technology sectors look pretty strong, as well as other areas such as the large caps within communication services and consumer discretionary.
Sam, when you woke up the day after Election Day, did you and your team, to what extent, if at any, did you alter your investment outlook here, accounting for a new Republican administration as well as a Republican Congress?
Well, good question. What we did do was make some changes ahead of the election, feeling that we needed to add more of exposure to an inflation hedge. So we added about 5% to a commodity area in terms of both digital as well as physical commodities. We also put out reports talking about those groups that would likely be helped or hurt by a Trump administration. I mean, we heard about the tariffs overnight, and so areas like aluminum, like steel, like timber would end up being benefited because of the anti-dumping.
Jargon alert with Sam Stovall. What is a digital commodity, a wise one?
Bitcoin. I know, Tom.
There we go. There we go.
I know, Tom, you haven't Bitcoin since they took silver out of it, but
yeah, exactly. I just wanted to get that. Robert Stovall never, not once, talked
Bitcoin
about a digital commodity. Exactly. Paul, save the interview.
Sam, talk to us about earnings here. What have you seen coming out of? We're finishing up this earnings season here. We've got a lot of companies giving forecasts for 2025. How do you feel about earnings out there?
Actually. Here's another example, in my opinion, of management doing a very good job of managing expectations. At the beginning of the quarter, expectations were for a 3.6% rise, according to S&P Capital IQ consensus estimates. We ended up with a 6.9% increase. 2024 full year now expected to be a little bit better than the end of quarter estimate, but we've seen 2025 come down from a 14.2% gain expected, now 13.4. So a bit of adjustment, more near term in terms of raising, longer term in terms of adjusting downward.
Sam Stovall, how long in the tooth is this bull market? I mean, you can do the baseball innings thing, but just within the cycles that CFRA and the Stovall families followed for well in excess of 60 years, how exhausted is this bull market?
Well, it's done exceptionally well, up more than 50% in the first 2 years. And the third year of a bull market is actually pretty challenging. Of all 11 bull markets that celebrated their second birthday, the average 12-month gain in the third year was 2.2%. And that's because 3 of those 11 slipped into new bear markets before the year was out. 2 more posted declines, though not enough to be tagged as new bear markets. 3 more posted gains of 6% or lower. And only twice did we have, or 3 times did we have double-digit advances. So I would tend to say the odds favor a challenging third year.
All right, Sam. So sectors here, I mean, I think a lot of folks are just wondering, can those technology names continue to be the leaders in this market? Or if, in fact, we're going to get maybe an administration, maybe a Federal Reserve that's going to be stimulative to this economy, maybe I can look at some more cyclical areas. How do you think about that?
Well, we have been seeing an improvement in momentum in the industrials category. Obviously, financials have done well with the lower interest rate environment. I think that investors will continue to focus more on growth rather than trying to buy and hold on the value categories. So I think really it's like whitewater rafting. They're going to let the market take them where it wants to go.
All right, Sam. So I guess the bottom line here is going forward over the next, 6 to 12 months, has your views changed here given this administration, given the change we're seeing in Washington, or is it steady as she goes and focus on earnings growth and value?
Well, I think that investors do have to be more vigilant and be careful, I think, of the changes that could be taking place, that could be inflationary, could erupt in trade wars. And so that could end up being a problem. I think also don't get too excited because valuations right now we're trading at 20% premium to only 10-year averages for PEs, price to sale, and enterprise value to EBITDA.
You got 5 stars in the banks. You got 5 stars on JP Morgan, Citigroup, and the rest?
We have 5 stars on smaller banks like PNC, like East West Bancorp. We have 4-star or buy recommendations on JP Morgan Chase.
See how he keeps that short. You know?
He's got it. He knows what he's doing.
Inside
It's not his first rodeo.
Sam exactly. Sam Stovall, thank you so much. Great way to start off the day. We got a real equity focus for you on this Tuesday. Kit Juckes will be along on foreign exchange. Gotta have. Did you see the George Saravelis note this morning from Deutsche Bank on tariffs?
I know.
We're efforting Mr. Saravelis over in London. He's in Mayfair having lunch right now. Red and green on the screen with our news in New York City. Here's John Tucker.
And Paul and Tom, millions of Americans with obesity would be eligible to have popular weight loss drugs covered by Medicare or Medicaid. That's part of a new rule the Biden administration proposed just this morning. While the rule would give millions access to weekly injectables that have helped people shed pounds, it would cost taxpayers as much as $35 billion over the next decade. Sam Fazeli of Bloomberg Intelligence says it may not sit well with the incoming Trump administration.
I think he's skeptical of these drugs, and therefore there is an interesting possibility setting up that once they're in charge, they might reverse this.
A bipartisan coalition of congressional members have lobbied for the drugs to be covered, saying it could save the government from spending billions of dollars on treating chronic ailments that stem from obesity. And, of course, President-elect Trump making his first specific threat to curb global trade flows since his election win. Details on that from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the U.S. will impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods, on top of all existing levies, beginning his first day in office. And in a separate post, the president-elect said he will impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. Trump framed these new levies as necessary to clamp down on migrants and illegal drugs flowing across borders. And the announcement came just after Trump tapped Scott Bessent to be the next U.S. Treasury Secretary. His selection was viewed as a sign of a more measured stance on tariffs. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
And Walmart joining a growing list of businesses reversing course on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. World's biggest retailer no longer will consider race and gender to boost diversity when granting supplier contracts and stop collecting demographic data when assessing financial eligibility. And 50,000 flights set to take off nationwide today. Most of this busy holiday week. For drivers this Thanksgiving holiday, AAA says more than 70 million are set to hit the roads. The good news, at least nationwide gas prices at their lowest level since 2021. I don't know. It's up to $2.59 at the Wawa.
That's still good. I'm $2.77.
It's still good, but it's up about 20 cents from the past few months.
Now, John, are you commuting for Thanksgiving? Are you going like a mile and a half?
I'm not moving out of my kitchen. You know what? I spent the entire weekend just cleaning the kitchen. That took 2 days to do.
Did you?
Nixon
was president the last time that happened.
The things I found under that stove.
Now, I got a key question. I'm going below 60th Street on Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Do I have to pay a congestion tax?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
We'll have to see on that. We welcome all of you across the nation, of course, on Apple CarPlay, on Android Auto, on your morning commute. Again, on YouTube, the way you can help Lisa Mateo, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube, growing each and every day. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, after the Dow reached a new record yesterday on word of a new Treasury Secretary pick, futures, well, they've lost a little bit of that steam. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.3%, 67 points, but Dow is little changed, up about 3 points. We have S&P futures up 0.2%, or about 15 points. And this all as President-elect Donald Trump promised more tariffs. We head over to the bond market. The 2-year yield, 4.25%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%. And that is little change. Heading over to currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that is little changed. We had the Japanese yen stronger, the euro British pound stronger as well. And we have Bitcoin only about 92,000. Some more earnings coming in fast and furious. Okay, so we get the coals. They're down 13%. It trimmed its full year outlook, pointing to weakness in apparel, footwear. And this news actually comes after the company announced Ashley Buchanan is going to replace Tom Kingsbury as CEO. And then we move over to Dick's Sporting Goods, up more than 5%. Beat estimates for third quarter, raised its guidance. And then you have Burlington Stores, that's down more than 5%. It said the warmer weather actually hurt its coat sales, and that's the reason for it. It fell short of Wall Street estimates for the coming quarter. And this Bloomberg Business Flash, it was brought to you by BNY. BNY's expertise and insights can help clients achieve their ambitions. Visit bny.com. Paul and Tom.
Elisa, thanks so much. Big equity focus today, and usually with George Congalvas of MUFG Securities, we look at bonds. Where's the 10-year? Where's the Sweeney? First thing I looked at this morning, the 10-year real yield from a 2.00, 1.99 down to 1.98. We'll see where that goes. But today, with their U.S. macro strategy ahead at MUFG, we got to do this tariff ballet as well. George, when you write out 15 pages on tariffs, what's it mean for those in the market, our listeners, our viewers who are quote unquote in the market? Is it just political noise or is it germane?
Look, it's germane mostly because it just kind of perpetuates, the unknown and really understanding how tariffs get implemented. It's a different form of uncertainty, and look, we have had some, taste of it back in 18 and 19 in Trump's first presidency. But I do think that tariffs get people nervous, and the markets get on edge whenever we hear any sort of word of it.
So, Paul, Mercedes in Mexico.
Yep.
Has Santiago Tianguistenco, they do trucks or something. Monterrey, I've been there.
Yep.
They do Monterrey. Toluca, they make engines, electronics, transmissions. Mercedes-Benz Saltillo, Class 7, Class 8 trucks. I think that's a little dated, but this is complex, Paul. It's not just us against them.
This is friendshoring, onshoring, but still the
I
tariff.
like that.
I know. See, I
did
remember
you learn that at Duke?
I might have learned that there. Hey, George, so what do we do here in the world of fixed income here? Tom was just quoting some yields here. I mean, the 2-year Treasury's 4.25%. Do you stick there, or do you take some credit risk in this fixed income world?
Look, credit risk was the trade for this year. To kind of expect it to kind of keep on giving the way it has for the last 18 months. I think a lot is baked into credit, and we have to think about tariffs cut both ways. I mean, there's a large portion of U.S. corporates get value add from overseas operations, and so if there's an impact to U.S. corporates, it's going to impact earnings as well. So it kind of cuts both ways. It's not just imposing on other countries. It could actually hurt U.S. corporate multinationals.
Go ahead, please.
So, George, I'm just thinking, as we think about 2025, I know you either have published or about to publish your 2025 outlook. Stocks, bonds, where do we go here for returns in 25?
Look, in general, I mean, we've extracted a lot of returns from various asset classes, and notably the last 2 or 3 weeks in that euphoric type move, in many ways has kind of priced in, what ostensibly is at least the down payment on the Trump trade, very much akin to what we saw in the 2016, 2017 markets take those playbooks and ran with it before the election and after the election. We discussed that on your show a couple times before. The bond market is forward looking. Now it's trying to figure out, our tariffs are going to be actually bad for growth, not just inflationary. So I think, I think being defensive makes a lot of sense here.
There's an ambiguity there in which way it cuts in terms of the vector to bring it back to the benchmark full faith and credit 10-year yield. George Concalves, if we have tariffs, if we have some sort of slowdown in real GDP, U.S. or global or North American, is that just a disinflationary vector by definition?
It could be very much in the beginning. As you kind of retool the economy, both U.S. and globally, you actually see less production, less growth, and that will take down expectations for near-term GDP. And that's why the curve is so flat right now. We were, many of us, including myself, were banking on a steeper curve, both through Fed cuts and maybe some term premium coming back in. But now the curve is back as a pancake, and that's not really good for business either.
All right, George, so kind of what are the key issues for you for 2025? What are the drivers and the key variables are you looking for in 2025?
Look, I think it's going to be about the sequencing. It's going to be about the sequencing, like what goes first and to what extent are various fiscal policies put in place. And I think that's going to be super critical. And then second, the Fed's reaction function to those things. We've heard from Chair Powell at the press conference and all Fed speakers since then, they're not taking into account fiscal policy, but it's in the back of their mind. And today, maybe we'll get an update with the Fed minutes and we'll see if there's any sort of kind of game plan criteria of what they're going to be looking for. So Fed's reaction function to the fiscal policy. And was this just a big sugar high that we've been in for the last 18 months?
George, some nice comments out on the live chat on YouTube. Thank you for these people are smart. I mean,
I know
they're not. What'd you call it? Fair? What was the phrase you used?
What?
Moments ago, I can't remember.
Oh, friendshoring.
Friendshoring, yeah. Nobody on live chat saying friendshoring. GBRT's got a really nice comment. George Concalves, can we substitute? I mean, if something from Canada has a 10, 15% tariff on it, do we forget about Canadian oil, like a case of Labatt's?
That's what I'm talking about.
Do we substitute a case of Labatt's? Is that how this works?
There's an element of that initially, for sure. Or to get access to the U.S. consumer and U.S. marketplaces, some organizations are going to have to eat the cost initially. I think there's an element of that, and at some point though, you do go into this kind of like escalation phase where it becomes tit for tat. But I think initially there'll be just a margin hit to corporates.
George, thank you. George Concalves, thank you so much. With MUFG today, I'm trying to find out. I got Costco, a case of Labatt's. That's a major expense right there. Target is $24.99. I think it's delivered to your house.
That's solid though. Labatt's is.
But then you just substitute for Budweiser, maybe.
I guess I don't know. But some of the things are going to potentially hit home, pretty fast, like a case of Labatt's. That kind of gets you.
I saw one statistic that 60% of Canadian oil or more goes to the United States.
Okay.
Sort of like from Detroit, Chicago, west. And
I hear the energy people talk. Yeah, I hear the energy people talk about energy markets, the oil markets as North America. It's kind of flowing back and forth.
What we promise for you is we'll get really smart people in on this tariff debate. As Professor Schiller says, it goes back to Thomas Jefferson. We were doing tariffs right at the beginning.
Yeah, it just feels like the global free market aspect that I think we all grew up with.
We all grew up with free trade. Remember,
30, 40 years, it seems to be a thing that passed.
You'd be in school and you'd impress people. Well, I was reading the Uruguay round.
Right, exactly.
I don't know where Chris Whalen, I'm sorry, I don't know where Uruguay is. Other than that, it's fine. But there was GATT, there was Uruguay. I was in Hong Kong the day the WTO collapsed with Jimmy Chang, who was running it, and he was in tears.
Yep.
It was incredible to see these changes, and then of course we let China into the WTO, and that's part of what the president-elect is talking about. We'll do much more on this, and of course, our political coverage. David Gura, did you know there's been a sighting?
He's back.
I think he's back.
Think he was coming back.
Could be remote from Rio, but extending, squeezing 8 days into 3. But David Gura is scheduled to be with us this morning, and we'll talk about this news. The news for you is red and green on the screen. Futures up 13, Dow goes the other way, NASDAQ up 0.3%. The VIX quiescent at a 14.60. On your morning commute, the new habit, turn to YouTube. Don't watch YouTube in your car. home, office, YouTube, Bloomberg Podcast. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have more economic data on tap for today. The Fed issuing minutes from its November meeting. Meanwhile, Neil Kashkari said it's still reasonable to consider another rate cut at the Fed's December meeting. He was pointing to the economy's resilience. We'll also get a read on new home sales, consumer confidence today, and then tomorrow, the focus will shift to the PCE index and also initial jobless claims. So let's check futures. Right now, we have red and green on the screen. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 63 points. Dow futures down 0.1%, 49 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 14 points. The 2-year yield at 4.24%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.27%, and that is little change. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, little change. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound stronger, and we have Bitcoin at around 92,000. More earnings coming in. We have shares of JM Smucker. They make Uncrustables, Meow Mix, cat food, Jif peanut butter, up more than 5%. They had an earnings beat. They said its Hostess acquisition actually helped boost the revenue. And then shares of Zoom, they're lower, down about 11%. Reported third quarter results didn't match those higher expectations. And we're awaiting word from Abercrombie and Fitch. I will bring that to you when it comes in. After the bell, it's right. Dell, CrowdStrike, Workday, and HP. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Are we using Zoom less? You know, beyond COVID and pandemic?
I don't know. I think people are kind of into it now. This is a new normal.
I think. I don't know.
Every guest is on Zoom.
No, I don't mean guests. I mean like in our day-to-day working lives. I walk by desks and they got Zoom set up with 25 people.
Yeah, still.
Well, it's all over the Bloomberg functionality. I mean, if you want to Zoom with somebody, it's a click of a button. You don't have to do anything.
Like, you know, I bust chops about the Royal Bank of Canada. You should see their Maple Leaf tickets.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, row 7, you get the Maple Leafs, you know, it's down a little bit. It's not at the 50-yard line. It's down a little bit. And then there's other advantages of being at the Royal Bank of Canada.
It's a typical Tuesday night. I'm listening to the kind of music she doesn't.
Oh, row 7, Taylor, Toronto. Amy Wu Silverman on the Surveillance Taylor Tour. How was it, Amy? You were in the Offspring wet. How was it?
It was amazing. I didn't go in being a Swiftie, but I've definitely converted, and my daughter is very happy about that. So it was very memorable.
What was the financial engineering like with Taylor? Yes. Like, were you popping like $10,000 for this extravaganza?
I took a fourth quarter hit, let's just put it that way. So it was a big 10-year-old birthday present.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. Muhammad was in Paris.
Yes.
With Stephanie. And Muhammad's there, you know.
Yep.
We have no life. Paul.
None.
We're like
whatsoever.
losers. Amy Wu Silverman with us right now with Royal Bank of Canada. Amy, I want you to characterize among the 4 cross moments, the derivative math that you're expert at, the new volatility that we face into 2025. Are you looking at fancy stuff like kurtosis? Are you looking at the skew? Or are you just looking at the fat tails, thin tails out there?
Well, Tom, we look at all those metrics and, I'm noodling on my 2025 volatility outlook as we speak. I think it's going to be another paddling duck market. And what do I mean by that? It looks calm on the surface, really smooth, but you got those violent sector rotations underneath that's being masked by relatively damp index volatility. And your tails, Tom, I think they're definitely fatter.
The tails are fatter. And what does that mean for Mag 7? I'm going to suggest selected Mag 7s doing well, but other Mag 7s will behind the 8 ball. What does volatility study tell you of the distance between Apple and Microsoft and Palantir? Is it Palantir? Did I pronounce that right? Palantir.
Yep.
I'm new, folks. What can I say? Palantir and NVIDIA.
Yeah, look, one thing we've always talked about is if tech goes, the market goes. And obviously that's just related to the Mag 7's weighting. I think when we think about next year, Mag 7 can't do badly. Certainly I think a lot of people are playing for that breadth widening trade. You continue to see that IWM proxy as where we see upside call buying, but Mag 7 cannot deteriorate. I do think people are being more specific about their hedges because they realize that when you think about S&P, when you think about NASDAQ, you really are thinking about those 7 stocks. So if they want a really specific hedge, a geopolitical hedge, they have to go hunting for perhaps energy ETFs or other sector ETFs to get their hedge on.
Amy, the S&P 500, just a ripping year in 2024, up 25% here. What's the derivatives market tell you about 2025? I mean, what are the expectations out there?
They still continue to be really sanguine, and we've really seen that since the elections. We had this volatility risk premium that was absolutely massive going into U.S. elections, and I will tell you, before the polls even closed, that entire volatility risk premium collapsed, and it was telling you it was over before it was actually over. I thought that was super interesting, and the go forward still looks quite positive. You still see that positive momentum, be getting more momentum. The only wrinkle I would say is the tails are fatter, meaning people are a little bit more worried about, especially with what we would call the intraday Twitter volatility of Trump, those tails potentially causing pockets of volatility and potholes as well.
So, I mean, we have, one would call a fairly red sweep across these elections. Are you seeing that reflected in the markets like, oh boy, there might be some real changes coming down the pike? I mean, I think usually the expectation is if you kind of got a split government, nothing's going to happen, less volatility. Now you might get some pretty sizable moves from a policy perspective.
Absolutely. And on top of that, you have what we would call idiosyncratic risk in the cabinet picks. And I'll just give you a really specific example. When you look at the healthcare ETF XLV, saw massive multi-standard deviation moves and volatility after RFK was chosen. And one thing we've talked about is when you kind of look at the correlation between those stocks, it's a little bit, baby out with the bathwater. People just made these kind of all out moves. And the question is, as we do our homework and we see actually what policies will or will not be enacted, do some of these moves become more knee jerk and we see them bouncing back? But right now, it's really relative volatility is high between the sectors. But again, that's being masked on the index level. You don't see it as much in the VIX.
When you look at this from a basic investment standpoint, and I'm going to give you a phrase, Amy, and I want you to translate it in your study, your optimism that I hear. This phrase, all-time high. What does ATH all-time high signal?
It's interesting because if you just go back to the old playbook, when you get that ATH, what are you supposed to do with it? Typically what people do is they remain holding the stock market, but they sell little volatility on top. So they say, hey, I'm still going to be long my stocks, but maybe I start selling calls on them, collect a little bit more incremental yield, Tom. And then that's why you get this volatility dampening. Now, what I think is interesting is in the past, post-COVID, when you get positive momentum, it actually continues to grind that momentum higher, not lower. That's what I think people are a little tricked up by.
But if you do that and sell, and I know you bring in a premium, but are there gajillions of listeners and viewers out there, Amy Wu Silverman, giving up the total return going up by taking in that volatility premium?
Sure, there's always a trade-off, right? If we get that rip higher, of course, you don't get to participate if you sold that call. But, as the market continues to march, 6,000, 6,500, 7,000, I think it becomes easier to do that, even if the volatility levels themselves that you're harvesting gets lower. I think that's the trade-off people are willing to make.
So, Amy, as we kind of go into 2025, do you expect, when you talk to your clients out there, your institutional investor clients, are they looking to assume risk, more risk, less risk? How are they kind of positioning themselves?
Here's what I would say. I'd say they still remain delta long the stock market. So they haven't, from a positioning perspective, taken money off the table, but they're willing to take a little bit of money they made this year and just own some hedges, own some downside protection, even if that's going to cost them a little burn. They're just more okay doing that with, as Tom said, that ATH being in play, but also with Trump in the office, we just know it tends to be a more volatile administration, especially when it comes to geopolitics or tariffs.
Amy, we don't care. All we want to know is your mom's ring in your pocket, her picture in your wallet, and you won't remember all my champagne problems. Did Taylor look down at you and your offspring after champagne problems when she burst into tears? I mean, is that what happened? She looked down and saw the joy on your daughter's face, and Taylor fell apart?
After Anti-Hero, we got a wave. It was very memorable. So after Anti-Hero, there was a little wave. I'm going to say it was to us, who knows, but we were very excited by it.
Amy Wu Silverman. This is the biggest response we got on YouTube today, is Amy Wu Silverman and Taylor. That's wonderful. Amy Wu Silverman, thank you so much. RBC Capital Markets there in Toronto with Taylor. I mean, John, are you going to go see Taylor?
No, actually, I'm not.
John is not a Swift. I'm shocked.
I'm going to see a Taylor ham for Thanksgiving.
Oh, very good. That's very good. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 14.56. Quiescent market, given the shock of those Trump discussions on tariffs. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
And President-elect Trump has delivered his first specific threat to curb global trade flows since his election win. Let's get details in this report from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the U.S. will impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods on top of all existing levies beginning his first day in office. In a separate post, the president-elect said he will impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. Trump framed these new levies as necessary to clamp down on migrants and illegal drugs flowing across borders. The announcement came just after Trump tapped Scott Bessent to be the next U.S. Treasury Secretary. His selection was viewed as a sign of a more measured stance on tariffs. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Some other news in Washington coming from the special counsel Jack Smith. He has moved to dismiss the election obstruction and classified documents cases against President-elect Trump. Bloomberg legal reporter Zoe Tillman says this was inevitable after Election Day.
Jack Smith says we stand fully behind the strength of the case. This is not about the merits, which we still think, were valid and should have moved forward, but that this Justice Department policy on not prosecuting sitting presidents is categorical.
Bloomberg Zoe Tillman says U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan granted Smith's motion to dismiss the election case in D.C. As for the classified documents case in Florida, Smith says he'll appeal the dismissal of charges against Trump's two co-defendants, but won't press ahead with a case against Donald Trump. In the Mideast, Israel and Hezbollah may be getting closer to a ceasefire deal. Israel's security cabinet expected to vote on the latest proposal today. And global airfares, they are set to become more expensive in 2025. According to an American Express global business travel forecast, ticket prices will reflect higher costs and lingering supply chain disruptions. Fares on most routes will rise, though the size of the increases is likely going to greatly vary by region. And finally, in the UK, yes, Rod Stewart will play the 2025 Glastonbury Legends slot 23 years after his last appearance at the festival. Sir Rod headlined Glastonbury in 2002, performing on the Sunday night to close out the festival. The musician turns 80 in January. He writes in an Instagram post, "This is going to be the end of large-scale world tours for me, but I have no desire to retire."
Right. Paul, what song did you wake up to every morning, freshman, sophomore year in college?
Oof.
You're hungover.
Yeah.
You got an 8 a.m. calculus course.
I don't know.
I woke up, Maggie May. I woke up to
okay,
Maggie
yeah.
May. This is Boulder, Colorado, every single morning at exactly the same time, and it wasn't computer. Maggie May, like 71-ish.
Oh, God.
You know.
Yeah, we're going back a
Lisa's
ways.
like, God, are you that old?
You know, he used to be a professional soccer player.
Oh, like big time.
Brentford, I think, was the team. Brentford Football Club.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, like the real
Back
deal.
in the day.
And he's really kept it going. I mean, but they're all, we're all getting older. Everyone but Lisa,
Yep.
They used to call him
Speak
Rod
for
the
yourself.
Bod, right?
Before Lisa.
Thank you, John Tucker. Greatly
They
appreciate
used to
that.
call Tom that, too.
Yes, they did. They used to. We need to do a YouTube shout out. There was a huge storm in England, and Big Jet TV is Jerry Dyer, and he's changed aviation. He's sitting there at Heathrow with a camera doing play-by-play as the planes land. And yesterday, like 10 in a row couldn't land.
Right? Oh, is
They
that right?
come down and they're hovering right over the runway. And I have a whole new appreciation for what these pilots do.
Crazy, yeah.
Because of YouTube and Jerry Dyer. Good morning, Big Jet TV out there. Red and green on the screen. Futures up 14. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks, well, trying to claw back those losses from President-elect Trump's tariff threat. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 60 points, but Dow futures down 0.1%, 46 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 14 points. The two-year yield at 4.24%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that is little changed. Deutsche Bank predicted the S&P 500 set to hit 7,000 by the end of next year. We'll head over to currencies right now. We have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have the Japanese yen, that's stronger. The Euro British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin at around 92,000. Few companies making news. Qualcomm, sources saying its takeover interest in Intel, that has cooled. Now, meanwhile, Intel, it secured $7.9 billion in U.S. federal CHIPS grants, but that was $635 million less than an earlier proposal. And Reuters reporting that Japan's prime minister asked President Biden to approve Nippon Steel's U.S. Steel deal. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
And now, folks, your cinema report with Paul Sweeney here, Senior Vice President, Surveillance. Cinema, Emerald. I got more comments just today on Tucker talking about the Emerald merch from Wicked for $40.
I know.
Popcorn thing. Here's Deadline. Thank you, Anthony D'Alessandro, Nancy Tartaglione. Gladiator Wicked drumming up a 200 million plus frame. That's Hollywood talk. And then Moana 2 joins the fray, expected to be 225 million day and date global opening.
Okay, solid.
How much of that ends up at the people that made the movie?
Oh, gosh. I mean, half goes to the theaters, half goes to everybody else in the production team. And the real question is...
Including the distributors, like Warner Brothers or whatever.
Exactly right.
Disney.
So half goes to the theaters, half goes to whoever produced and starred in and wrote and did all that kind of stuff. The real question for the stars who take the back end, Tom, is how much do I get if I take 5% of the profits?
And the answer is they get teen sweets.
It depends on how good your lawyer is, because Hollywood movie accounting is the most opaque in the world, I think.
Okay. I mean, I think the answer is they get little, and it's a debate.
Depends who you are,
I didn't see Inside Out 2. Lisa, did you see Inside Out 2?
I did not, but it did really well.
$95 million. Wow.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages of Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey. Custody solutions, no ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest at IBKR.com/RIA. IBKR.com/RIA. Lisa, you can't top yesterday. Go.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm starting with this. This came out in the Financial Times. The morale for Citigroup, some of the workers are not happy. They're not getting those year-end promotions. This is from sources that tell the Financial Times as many as 2,000 Citi employees, they could get a bump to their pay and title next month. But that's down from about 8,000 that used to get it. So you see the difference there. The decision, though, is still not final. And that changes for those in-seat promotions. That's the people who get the pay increases, better titles without changing their roles or responsibility. But even in those cases, the pay raise is expected to be limited to 15%. So it's not helping morale.
Sometimes if as a manager, if you don't have the money to pay somebody higher, one of the ways you can compensate them is just giving them a bump in title. And that kind of buys you a little time. So,
without the money.
But the
without
report,
the money.
and last night, 9 p.m., folks, we're watching this 24/7, and Lisa, I believe, is going to get to Morgan Stanley as well.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, how do you generate a pay cut? We want you to stay with us, but we need to cut your pay.
Yeah, that doesn't fly.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I have no history where that works.
No, that does not.
People get furious.
Yes, it's just not good. But
that's
and again,
in the report, right?
But if
Lisa?
you work for these investment banks, the only real lever you have on your expenses is compensation and headcount, and that's it.
Yeah, but like I saw yesterday, Barclays is going back into Singapore. The answer is they always come back, and they have to have the top decile of employees. Not to pick on anyone, but you got to keep dominant constant.
Sure, absolutely.
Period.
Yep,
and there's a lot of dominant constants. We're honored they come in a program, but I found the Citigroup report just fascinating. And I say thank you, Lisa, for doing that. What do you got next?
Okay, this is the Morgan Stanley. I want to get right to this so we have enough time to talk about it. But it's about their wealth management empire. You guys know, you probably live that the wealth management division, it oversees about $6 trillion of assets, represents close to half the firm's revenue. But you know the Wall Street Journal, they reported the DOJ, Federal Reserve, SEC, they're investigating their vetting procedures to see how sufficient their anti-money laundering controls are. But now the Journal got these hands on their internal Morgan Stanley documents. They did interviews with current, former employees. So they found out a little bit more about those day-to-day operations, like how the bank wooed clients from countries known for financial corruption, drug trafficking, including Venezuela. Documents warning about the bank's risk increasing because of its exposure to Russia, sanctioned Russian banks.
One
so
paragraph
there's a lot
was on
going
Pakistan.
on. Yes, yes.
I mean, this isn't about somebody out in Joliet.
No.
Paul, this is about international troubled money.
Here at Bloomberg, like every financial institution in the U.S. at least, we take serious training on know your customer, and it's an issue globally, but certainly when you go outside of the U.S., it becomes that much more of a risk, and there's so many risk controls that Bloomberg has and other financial institutions have, but boy, is it tough.
You've lived this more than me. Know your end of quarter. Somebody's screaming, we got to make our hurdle for the end of corner, bring in that account from XYZ.
Yep.
That's the other side of the debate.
Exactly.
If we don't get that account, somebody else will get it.
Exactly right, and we won't make our numbers and things
we won't
like
make
that.
our
So
numbers.
the pressure is there, and there's so much wealth all around the world, the Middle East, Latin America.
That wants to come to America.
Exactly right. And the U.S. financial institutions want that, but they have to be extraordinarily careful about knowing your customer.
Lisa, what do you got?
Okay.
These are all so serious. This isn't like Lisa.
Well, then, okay, so let's switch it up a bit. Holiday dessert time. Do you cook
There we
pies?
go.
I don't know if you cook pies or not, but it's going to be a little bit more pricey because the egg prices are on the rise.
Ken Fellio, eggs
Yes?
again, Ken. Eggs.
Oh,
It all
eggs,
comes
see?
back to eggs.
It always comes back to eggs.
It's the global commodity.
Bird flu outbreak. That's the reason why holiday baking season getting
We've been
underway.
talking about these
happens
flus for
every holiday. I don't know what it is. But here's the thing with the prices. Okay, so the good news is that the prices are still far from the recent peak that they had almost 2 years ago. The American Egg Board, it says those egg shortages at grocery stores, they've only been isolated, kind of temporary, so you're okay for now. But the average price of a dozen eggs, I'm not sure if you've been shopping lately, it's $3.37. That was in October. And that was up 63% from October of last year. So a big jump from, the same time last year. But it's just demand.
All right, here
for
we go.
eggs.
EGGSESUS. That is the ticker symbol for USDA broiler eggs set in incubators for the United States. I don't know, it's all over the place, but it's definitely up pretty substantially just in the last couple of months. It's up, let's call it 5% in the last couple of months. So prices are all over the place.
You got one more?
No, John Tucker stole it, so I'm good.
Oh, John Tucker stole it.
He stole my stuff.
Are you going to see Moana tomorrow? Everybody, we're all living vicariously through Lisa Mateo. Are you going to go see Moana 2 tomorrow?
I am not going to see. I might have to wait for the streaming. If I had the younger kiddos.
That's not what we want to hear from the movie theaters.
If I want to hear from if I had younger kiddos.
Like
younger kids, right?
Wu Silverman took a fourth quarter hit.
Yep.
Going to see Taylor. You took a fourth quarter hit.
I took a fourth quarter hit with Glicked. It took a fifth. Yeah, definitely a fourth quarter hit.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Let's look at the markets, folks, off of the Trump tariff news last evening. The VIX 14.54, red and green in the screen. I'm going to call it a churn to the equity markets. Paul, what do you see?
Yeah, I see kind of red and green, Tom, as you were just suggesting. The S&P's up about 1/4%. The Dow's kind of flattish, off just a couple of ticks here, and the Nasdaq's up 0.3%.
You look away from the launch pad and the world changes. 10-year real yield to 4 digits, 1.9670 for global Wall Street. That's a big deal.
Yep, below 2%
really
kind of gets your
2%.
attention here. And let's just look at the commodity space, Tom. WTI crude oil just kind of flattish here. It's still below $70 per barrel.
70.
Gold higher yet again. And Bitcoin off 2% today.
What do you think?
We were up close to $100,000, got up to about $98,000, $99,000 per token. A little bit of that Trump trade maybe pulling back a little bit. We're now at just under $92,000 per token.
Jimmy was trying to date Betty. Girl band, Shangri-La's. Good morning.
is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions over Israel's war with Hamas continue to grow.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, and Lisa Mateo. Good morning on your commute across the nation. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Good morning on Sirius. Do you use Sirius?
I do.
I remember the first time I was out on Beach Road and somebody had Sirius a million years ago.
Sure.
It was like magical, and it's
Howard
still
Stern?
magical. Yeah, Howard Stern is the one
that's
that
my guy.
invented it. I think we're a little Howard Sternish.
Oh, yeah.
In our,
I've been listening to him
our
forever.
way. Good morning to all of you, and of course at the office, at home, YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, building each and every day our new digital platform. Coming up, a really important discussion with one of the great thinkers of Wall Street, Nathan Sheets, will join us, and he's just done a definitive study of our household net worth, or the lack thereof. I got a great Bloomberg chart to go into it. Stay with us here in a couple minutes. We'll get to that. Red and green on the screen. News flow this morning, really substantial for a Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Lots of economic data in this hour, and then, of course, to the onslaught tomorrow as well. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures mix, and this is after President-elect Donald Trump threatening an additional 10% tariff on goods from China, 25% on all products from Canada and Mexico. Now, that news actually sent shares of Stellantis and Nissan lower down more than 3% each. They both produce vehicles in Mexico. There are also reports that Nissan plans to cut production in the U.S. Now, the Canadian dollar had slumped to a 4-year low. The peso traded close to its weakest since 2022, and China's yuan edged lower offshore. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index right now is a little changed. We'll head over to futures. NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 60 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 34 points. And S&P futures up 0.2% or 13 points. The 2-year yield at 4.24%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.28%, and that is little changed. And so much for 100,000. Bitcoin now down nearly 2% at around 91,000. To earnings we go. Shares of Kohl's down 15%. It trimmed its full-year sales outlook. It pointed to weakness in apparel, footwear. Then you have Dick's Sporting Goods up more than 8%, raised full-year sales outlook. It posted strong results, back to school season, high demand for that sports gear. And then on the flip side, you have Best Buy cutting its full-year guidance, down 7%. Demand slowed for electronics and other appliances. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
High demand for sports gear. Paul, I was over, Mrs. Keene and I were over at the Mateo house,
Sure.
Cocktails, beverages, watching some football. You look out in the backyard, and it looks like a field house at a major state college. I mean, Lisa, is every square foot, you got a batting cage?
We have the
you have a whole batting cage.
The whole bow nets are out there. Yes. So sports gear is
Are you
quite
doing the
high on
ice
my
rink
list.
this winter with the Zamboni?
Yes.
You're going to put the ice rink in this year. Good. Joining us right now, and I don't know how this happened. Nathan Sheets needed a job after Fed, after IMF. And I don't know if it was Willem Bouter or Catherine Mann, but they said, let's hire this guy. They took a chance. He's one of America's greatest thinkers about where we are. And Nathan Sheets of Citigroup now, their global chief economist, has just done definitive work on our net worth. I look at the Bloomberg chart, Nathan, and it's pretty much I'll get it out, 3, 2, 1. Uninterrupted prosperity for America. Other nations aren't like that, are they, Dr. Sheets?
One of the differentiating features of this cycle has been the remarkable outperformance of the U.S. economy. You see that in GDP, you see that in consumption, but you especially see it in the asset markets and in wealth creation. The wealth that has been created in the United States over the last decade is historic and breathtaking. And we really have figured out a strategy to make our citizens in aggregate much wealthier than they have been previously.
Net worth from the bottom of 2020, 3 once-in-a-lifetime events on my Bloomberg chart, up 49%.
Yeah,
household net worth. But that's not everyone in America.
No,
Paul.
it's not. Nathan, when you go around the world and you talk to Citi's clients, and maybe they're not as familiar with the U.S. market, how do you kind of describe the U.S. economy here and the U.S. consumer?
Broadly speaking, if they're in investments, they have to be familiar with the U.S. market. This is where the action has been probably over the last 20 years. The United States is where the action has been. And I think the underlying driver, as you're suggesting, is this just very resilient economy that we have and the ongoing growth. And now if I have to find a sector that's particularly responsible, on the demand side, I think it's the consumer. And particularly, now this gets into the K-shaped discussion, particularly that top 40% of the income distribution.
I'm dying, Nathan, to ask.
Wonderful place.
I got to ask this question. I think it's so important. In a K-shaped economy, who did we talk? Was it Francis Donald yesterday, BMO, about K-shape? How much of our net worth growth is in upper decile or upper quintile America? I mean, this whole election was about this, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the answer in this is the key. In aggregate, things look great, but approximately 100% of the net worth increase is in the top half of the income distribution and the wealth distribution, full stop. And you see a similar dispersion across sectors. Where's the big winning sector on the production side of the economy? It's tech. And I think this combination of these high net worth households that top, say, 40% of the income and wealth distribution and the tech sector, that's been the differentiating factor for the United States relative to the rest of the world.
Nathan, the K-shaped economy in the U.S., how unusual are we today versus 20, 40, 60 years ago? Is the disparity today wider than it's ever been?
Notably, if you look at the distribution of wealth over, let's say, the past century, it is now far more unequal than it was 20 or 40 years ago. It's just kind of rocketed upward. But notably, there is another period, and this gives me pause, in which there was broadly similar inequality in the distribution of wealth in the economy. And that was during the 20s. And then a lot of wealth was destroyed, of course, during the Great Depression. And we came out of World War II with a much more equal wealth distribution. But it's gradually and significantly increased again in inequality over the last 70 years.
Nathan, I got to get this in because I know you're demanding that Andrew Hollenhorst do a 90-page look forward into 2025. Hollenhorst nailed that rates would go up and stay up. And then Citigroup turned around and said there'll be a vector here of Fed rate cuts. Let's get out front of your 2025 call. Are you going to reaffirm a sequence of Fed rate cuts with Dr. Hollenhorst?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of the outlook for 2025. And that is, how robust is this U.S. economy? And when we look at where we are and we extrapolate those trends forward, it feels like we're going to have another year of solid growth in 2025. My colleague Andrew Hollenhorst, who you mentioned, I think he's a little concerned about the labor market and the Fed's response. If we continue to have this solid economy that we have, maybe the Fed cuts a couple more times. If the economy's softer, then the Fed could be much more aggressive. And I think that's the dimension of the debate that we're having at Citi. Right. I think that's the debate that, broadly speaking, I have with clients all over the world is just how robust is this U.S. economy?
Nathan, thank you so much. Nathan Sheets, of course, with Citigroup, the chief economist. And I must say, a wonderful report on household net worth. We protect the copyright of all of our guests. Get that from Citigroup, not from us. We don't do that. We don't. Can you send out the report? We don't do that. We don't. They got to make a living. Sure. Nathan Sheets, thank you. So much. Red and green on the screen, sort of a quiescent market.
Yeah, sure. It's a little mixed here. No real direction. Maybe it's a holiday shortened week for many.
Is. Let's go to a quiescent news report. Our news with John Tucker.
All right, and we'll start off with this one. President-elect Trump vowing additional tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Shaking the markets initially with his first specific threats to the U.S.'s top trading partners since his election win 3 weeks ago. Trump says he's going to impose additional 10% tariffs on goods from China, 25% tariffs on all products from Mexico and Canada. These come in post to his Truth Social network. And plenty of reaction this morning to the tariff plans. Jennifer Hillman is the former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative.
I think, again, you can expect this to be very, very transactional. And I think that's part of the reason for announcing it well before he's even in office. I mean, he is clearly looking for, and I would say, Canada and Mexico to come to him with offers of things that they can do.
Former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative Jennifer Hillman. The Biden administration proposing a rule that would require the U.S. government to cover weight loss drugs. Let's get more on the story from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
The new rule would give an estimated 3.4 million older Americans on Medicare and 4 million more adults in Medicaid programs for the poor access to weight loss treatment, according to the White House. The proposal would slash out-of-pocket costs by as much as 95% for the drugs that can carry a price tag of $1,000 a month. Medicare, which provides coverage to about 52 million older Americans, currently doesn't pay for related drugs like Wegovy and Zepbound for obesity. And just 13 state Medicaid programs cover the blockbuster weight loss medications. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
And Republican lawmakers calling on the Biden administration to preserve documents related to the proposed sale of U.S. steel to Japan-based Nippon Steel. They're expressing serious concerns that politics have tainted an ongoing national security review of the deal and raising the prospect of a congressional probe. Brothers Eric and Lyle Menendez hoping for a December hearing to plead their release after serving 35 years for the 1989 murders of their parents. Now, the next hearing in Los Angeles is scheduled actually for late January, so it could be many months before the brothers are released, potentially. Lots of people heading to the airport, and a lot of Spirit Airlines ticket holders kind of worried about whether they're going to make it to their destinations. Spirit, of course, they filed for bankruptcy last week, just before the busiest travel stretch of the year. So it's important to know that the airline is not shutting down. It's reorganizing in an effort to keep its business alive. Spirit does say passengers can use all tickets, credits, and loyalty points as if nothing happened. By the way, the carrier has hired a brand advisor to help it shed its reputation as one of America's most disliked airlines. Brand advisor. We could use one. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now and John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Jen Tucker, thanks so much. This is Inside Baseball off the Bloomberg Terminal. Bloomberg Intelligence, which Paul Sweeney has a nodding acquaintance with. Robert Schiffman is a jewel. Who's Robert Schiffman, Paul?
Yeah, he's a credit analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence.
Of tech.
And he follows the technology
But they don't
industry.
have any debt.
Well, they issue debt. Why do they issue debt? Because they can.
Because they can. He's got a great chart out moments ago, and it's stark. Earnings and cash flows like ginormous, magnificent. And this is it's like a Dan Ice thing. Event risk is ginormous. Like there's serious event risk, and valuation's a little rich. M&A's a little rich. But Robert Schiffman out on tech. Look for that on the
Credit
Bloomberg
research.
Terminal today. Futures up 12. The VIX flat, 14.61. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, after the Dow reached a new record yesterday on word of a new Treasury Secretary pick, futures, well, they've lost a little bit of that steam. President-elect Donald Trump promises more tariffs, so now we look at Dow futures up basically 0.2%, about 12 points. Dow futures down 0.1%, 82 points. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, or 45 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.24%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 4.28%, and that is little change. To commodities, Brent crude, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,639 an ounce. Over to the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that is little change, while we have Japanese yen, euro, and British pound stronger. More earnings. We have Abercrombie & Fitch. Their shares down 2%. It reported record net sales, but it only matched estimates. Wall Street was really expecting some stronger growth because it had 7 straight quarters of year-over-year revenue gains. Burlington Stores, they said warmer weather hurt its coat sales, and that will fall short of those Wall Street estimates for the coming quarter. Its shares are down 2%. And finally, shares of J.M. Smucker, the maker of Jif peanut butter, well, that's up more than 5% after an earnings beat. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much.
Her name was Lola. She was a showgirl with yellow feathers in her hair.
And there's been a David Gura sighting joining us in the studio after 8 days in Rio. David Gura joins us.
Yeah.
Off the
And
meeting.
8 crazy nights.
I've never been. I'm supposed to go to Brazil like 3 times, and I've never gone.
You should.
What was it like, a wise one?
Beautiful. I mean, geographically, so impressive. It's on the water, of course, with those giant beaches, and then these islands everywhere. The water was blue from my
and you
vantage.
went to the tippy top of the mountain.
Yes, we
and
did
saw...
Sugarloaf Mountain. We took you take 2 cable cars. You go to one and then take it to the other, and there's food and drink to be had, and views
Right.
galore. And then we did another trek up to see Christ the Redeemer, which was impressive. Packed with people, though. I mean, it's one of those things that's totally ruined or changed by selfies, because it's just packed to the gills with people taking photos of
Okay,
themselves.
so you were not at McDonald's. You were at some
I saw
place
one.
where you
I
sit
didn't
down.
go.
You sit down at restaurant. You know who sat down next to you for dinner at one point? You said?
Ursula von der Leyen, the
Like
head of the European Commission, was there with
German
her
defense
team. She was there, and they had caipirinhas. I hope I'm not saying too much, but it's a very funny. There was a lot of criticism that summit got for being kind of off the rails, but it felt very intimate, like a microcosm in a way. And so you would see the motorcades. It's all along the big Atlantic Boulevard there on the water. And so at dinner we sat next to the
Back to
European
reality.
President.
Tariffs.
Yes. Yeah.
Report to us the big take Gura look on where we're heading in this debate.
Well, I think that the very vital debate is, what was this move from the president-elect yesterday? Was this the opening salvo in his second term? Is he trying to get a reaction from Mexico and Canada and China? Or is this, a very earnest, numerically driven policy plan that he's put in place on his social media site? So I think we're going to try to hammer that out today. And we did a great episode. I'll do a shameless plug for the one we did on Scott Bessent, in which so many people thought he's insufferable, thought he was going to be this moderating force. I think what we've learned here over the course of the last 24, 36 hours is he will be serving this president-elect and not the one who's sort of pioneering economic and trade policy, perhaps even less so trade policy, because that's kind of under the remit of Howard Lutnick at the Commerce Department. The president-elect has moved it under there. So it will be interesting, to say the least, to watch how these pieces kind of move around and shake out. And again, I think we're going to be kind of trying to figure out here how earnest a threat this was.
I mean, I guess some of the trade, what I've read on some of the trade news over the last 24 hours is perhaps President-elect Trump will view that tariffs as a negotiating ploy on a whole host of issues, including immigration, including drugs coming into the country, and this is a bargaining chip, as opposed to a piece of a coordinated economic policy.
Yes, a bargaining chip, or the tool that he is most fond of using and has used before. I think that's true. So you look at the statements that he released yesterday, and they were so explicit about the things that you mentioned, that being drugs coming across the border and people coming across the border. I think they do showcase a kind of naivete just about how interconnected trade is here on this continent, especially when you look at the U.S. and Canadian tariffs that he's proposed. I mean, we have this agreement among these 3 nations. They are such huge trading partners of the United States, and to kind of put these in place the way he suggests would really upend a lot of things.
Lighthizer, no trade is free. Frankly, folks, it's on my reading desk, right next to the beverage of my choice. Chapter 18, A Prescription for the Future. A, does Lighthizer have a future with this new administration?
Where is Bob Lighthizer? It's a very good question. So we have seen a number of these advisors to the former president-elect, get these positions in the new administration. Bob Lighthizer has not, and I think that there was some speculation that he might be in the running for the Treasury Department. We saw early on someone floating that he might go back to the U.S. Trade Representative's office, something that his camp shot down. Maybe that was part of this kind of public spat that we saw among these many millionaires and billionaires when they were looking for jobs. But he is, of course, the most hardline on this, and proudly so. And I think that as we awaited that decision on the Treasury Secretary, there were a lot of people who were fearful of the fact that if Lighthizer were to get it, that really would take the president-elect down a path of really great protectionism.
Scott Bessent, well received, at least initially, by the markets as Secretary of the Treasury. What did you guys have on your podcast? What were some of the discussions you guys were having?
Well, I talked to Saleha Mosen, our colleague in D.C., who did a lot of the reporting on that search and on him. And, indeed, he's a known quantity. He's somebody who kind of deliciously worked for George Soros before. So I think a lot of Republicans and people on the right who are skeptical, to say the least, of George Soros have been able to excuse that in this process. But has a long career as a macro trader and has wanted to be in public service for a very long time. I looked up over the weekend, he had aspirations to be a journalist. He wanted to be the head of the Yale Daily News and didn't get that, and that cost a career rethink, which led him to the world of hedge funds. So something Saleha and I talked a lot about is, what do you bring to this job with that experience? Of course, Steven Mnuchin was a hedge fund manager as well, so it's not unprecedented that he come into that role, but it's certainly a departure from the likes of Janet Yellen, who's, of course, an academic, trained academic economist and somebody who spent a long career in Washington running a lot of big institutions.
In a general statement, with Maya McGinnis speaking to Bloomberg yesterday, the great deficit researcher, what Saleha Mosen's doing at Treasury, is all of this funny talk, wasted talk, because the president-elect and all Americans are going to face a budget and debt and deficit debate on day whatever. What day is that, David Gura?
It's coming. I don't think that it's going to be on day one. And what I will say is that Scott Bessent has not been shy about talking about the deficit, more so than a lot of advisors to the former president. He was on our air with Joe Matthew, Kayleigh Lyons, just about a month ago, and it's something that he brought up and said was very worrisome to him. So I think the way that he's able to do that dance will be fascinating to watch, because it is something that he's clearly worried about. I think, again, coming from his background trading in currencies and looking at kind of the economy at a macro level, is worried about it. I'm wondering about the degree to which he's going to impress that upon the president-elect. And of course, he can talk all he wants about the deficit, but it's something that's going to be in the court of the Congress to have to deal with. And now we have a president-elect who has the support of both houses. We'll see how much traction he can get there.
Can we go nerdo with David Gura?
Sure.
Okay. So there was Rawlsian justice in the 70s. And way before that, there was this wacko thing, transcendentalism. And before that, there was a conservative tone, mercantilism. How far back has President-elect Trump taken us? To the 17th century?
I don't know if to the 17th century I'm touched. I think you have my dad's book underneath that Lighthizer tone with your beverage of your choice. But yeah, he is taking us back. We've talked so much about the prospects for there being free trade, a freer trade system.
I'm running out of time. Where is he taking us back to? That's what our viewers and listeners want to know. The 1920s?
I'd say the 20s. I'd feel comfortable saying that. But I'll come back to you with a more thoughtful answer on that if I can. You've surprised me.
That's pretty thoughtful. I mean, for surveillance.
And nationalism.
It's a plea for an extension on that homework assignment, Tom.
Yeah.
Did you hear our Amy Wu Silverman?
Yes.
Man, I can see you taking the Gura horde to see Taylor. I mean, I
up
could
in
just
Toronto.
see you.
Is it still in Toronto? Where's the show now?
No, they did Toronto.
Yeah.
She was in tears. She gave Amy Wu Silverman got a wave from Taylor.
Okay.
Finishing up in Vancouver, I understand.
Oh, that's it. The Gura family.
That
jet
sounds
out
nice.
there?
Yeah. We haven't even done Wicked yet. I mean, I think that's a harder
no,
ticket to get
Mateo
right
has.
now. Yeah.
We're all over it.
I feel like it's going to be a $500 ordeal.
Are you all? Do they have movie theaters in Brooklyn?
Oh yes.
I don't think
Brooklyn.
they do.
You can get a full meal.
Are you Moana this weekend?
We might be.
We might be Moana.
That's been spotted on the marquee with some interest. The Gura children are excited about that. So.
David Gura, thank you so much, and wonderful to have you back from really important work at G20. As Mr. Gura mentioned, folks, it wasn't Pittsburgh, okay? Obama, Pittsburgh. All sorts of good things happen.
The beaches are better.
The beaches are better the Monongahela, or do you want Copacabana? David Gura with the easy test there as well. We continue economic data really at 9 a.m. this morning, but we'll clarify here at 8:30. Tomorrow on Onslaught, we'll go beneath the headline numbers. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got more economic data on tap for today. The Fed issuing minutes from its November meeting. Meanwhile, Neil Kashkari said it's still reasonable to consider another rate cut at the Fed's December meeting. We'll also get a read on new home sales, consumer confidence. That comes out at 10 o'clock Wall Street time today. Tomorrow, we shift to the PCE index and also initial jobless claims. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 42 points. Dow futures down 0.3%, 137 points. S&P futures up 0.1% or 11 points. The 2-year yield at 4.25%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. The Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down more than 1% at around 92,000. We have shares of Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly. They're both higher this morning. We have Novo ADRs up more than 2%, Eli Lilly up 4%. The reason why? Well, we're that weight loss drugs would be covered by the U.S. government under a Biden administration proposal. And then you have shares of Amgen down 11%. Its experimental obesity shot, it only helped patients lose up to 20% of their body weight in a trial. Investors were hoping for better results, also fewer side effects. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Getting red and green on the screen. The VIX 14.56. Maybe adjusted tomorrow by a plethora, a raft of economic data. Our economic indicators always brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support, future-ready technologies. Grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. We thank Commonwealth, and we'll dive into a wall of data tomorrow. Lots of data here at 9 a.m. Coming up. Out here, Paul, on Twitter, they're talking about our coverage of Taylor Swift with Amy Wu Silverman.
Yep.
Saying, talking about Taylor Swift is creepy here. She was like a financial juggernaut this year.
Amazing. Yeah.
Like, can I say $1 billion B?
Yeah, I saw that report 6 months ago. I'm sure it's way higher than that now. But what I thought was interesting was the economic impact it had on the various cities when her tour came to town in terms of hotel stays and restaurants, and people were coming from all over to see her in various cities around the world.
And she did her own show movie without Hollywood's help, right?
Yeah. She's it's
amazing.
Amazing individual.
Victoria Fernandez has seen Taylor 8 times, Chief Market Strategist, Crossmark Global, and joins us right now. Victoria, you and Bob Dahl get in the same room and talk about the equity view forward. What are you writing for 2025?
Yeah, well, listen, guys, it's going to be pretty choppy in our opinion. And a lot of that, we got through the election, and I think a lot of people went great. The biggest unknown, the biggest uncertainty we've now passed by that. So it should be smooth sailing. And I think that's probably true from now till the end of the year, maybe the first month of next year. But there's still a lot of unknowns. Y'all have been talking about it all morning. When you look at what the tariff policy is going to be and what that's going to mean for trade, you look at all the industries that can affect from lumber to autos to machinery. There's questions around the growth and the productivity that
Right.
we're going to see going forward with Bessent there. So I think there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, but the path of least resistance, at least for the near term, still seems to be higher.
What do you see in Texas? The unemployment rate there published October, 4.1%, but it's like its own country,
Yeah,
frankly.
absolutely.
But the key thing to me, Victoria, is Texas unemployment rate, Dell's reporting this afternoon, I should point out,
Good.
is literally below where it was before the financial crash. I mean, it's a better unemployment rate maybe than it was in early 2007. It's a boom economy, right, Victoria?
I mean, it is. What do they say? Everything's better in Texas. So, I mean, I've got to agree with that. But we have a very diversified economy. Used to, we were only thought of as an oil and gas state. And we've had so many people come in over the past few years during the pandemic. Our population has grown tremendously. And you talked about Dell. We have a huge tech component here in our state. We still obviously huge in oil and gas. We have a huge healthcare system here in the state as well. So we have a lot of diversification and a lot of ways to put people at work. And we have great universities here as well. So we have a great source in order to put people to work. So there's a lot of positives for the state. I think we have a government here that puts the people first and really focuses on Texas first. And that's helped with some of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Tom, this weekend, Texas A&M football.
Oh, it's going to be such a good game, guys. I cannot wait.
It's going to be huge
But
down there.
it should be on Thanksgiving as it was in my youth. We'd go to the Aggie muster.
Yep.
My father went to College Station.
Right.
He was there before there were women there. It's what he used to tell us. But there's a great game. It was Thanksgiving Day. Now we have to put up with the Detroit Lions. I don't know what that's about.
It's Saturday prime time. It's going to be a huge game. Hey, Victoria, given the relatively strong economic backdrop that we see, what do you think this Federal Reserve feels like it needs to do? I know we're going to get a lot of inflation data tomorrow, but it seems like the Fed's focusing more on the labor market a little bit here. So how do you think they're going to proceed?
Yeah, if you're asking me what I think they should do, I would say I think they should pause at the December meeting. They've already done 75 basis points of cuts. And guys, look, 75 basis points of cuts, but yet conditions have actually tightened overall by 25 basis points. Yields had moved higher up until yesterday with the Bessent announcement, but we've seen yields move higher. We've seen conditions actually tighten. We've seen markets hit all-time highs. You can't tell me that we are being restrictive at a point in time when all that's happening as the Fed is cutting rates. So I think they do need to take a pause right here. The bond vigilantes took a breather yesterday, but I think they could come roaring back pretty quickly if the Fed seems to be too dovish. Now, what are they actually going to do? I wouldn't be surprised if we got another 25 basis point cut. We know Powell is focused on this. We want to get down to neutral. Again, I think their idea of where neutral is probably needs to shift higher than where it is. We'll see what the conclusion is. There is some weakness still in that labor market, but you've got super core CPI at 4.5%. Do you remember back in November of 22 when Powell said this was the best signal of underlying inflation that we had, and it's gone up the last 2 months.
Yep.
So there's a lot of elements here for them to look at.
So in the fixed income space, Victoria, a lot of folks feel pretty comfortable sitting in that 2-year Treasury at 4.25%. Are you comfortable there, or are you willing to take some credit risk?
I don't mind taking credit risk at all. I still want to be investment grade. I know there's been a huge risk-on effect across all the different sectors of the market. We've seen it in Bitcoin. We've seen it in other areas. But I would still stay investment grade. I like having a barbell going on. I like that short end of the curve with those yields higher. The 7-year part of the curve is actually the cheapest part right now. So I would say you could go out 7 to 10 years, get a little bit of extra yield and lock that in for a period of time. So I think that should be an allocation in your portfolio.
Can we have a moment of silence? And good morning to Michael Dell. Michael listens to the show often, traipsing around Austin and other points across this nation. Paul Sweeney, Dell Computer, the last 10 years, 36.7% per year.
I know. I'm totally flew under my radar. The transformation of Dell from really like a PC play, maybe not so good, to just a broader technology play, a chip play.
Okay.
He's done that. I know the company was private for a while, but still, that's amazing.
I mean, it's amazing. Victoria, it's absolutely amazing, the entrepreneurship of Texas. Do you just assume there the traffic gets worser and worser?
It does seem to get worse, I will admit that, but we've got some good infrastructure going on here. We're building more. We have these 10-lane freeways, so everyone join in. Get there, get to work. We're all going back to work here in Texas 4 or 5 days a week.
I got 30 seconds. Is there a congestion tax in Houston? 10-lane freeway?
I think there is. Yeah,
Okay.
but come on. We'll take you anytime. Come on down.
Victoria, don't be a stranger. Victoria Fernandez, Chief Market Strategist, Crossmark Global. Between her and Bob Dahl, with two very different tones and opinions and takes. Really good equity coverage out of Crossmark Global Investments. Red and green on the screen. Paul, what is it? It's just like a quiescent churn to the market.
It is. I think people are coasting into this holiday. I'm going to recalibrate kind of what's happened really over the last several weeks with the election. I've been trying to think about 2025 because Tom, S&P 500 up 25% year to date.
I did not know this.
How about that?
Thank you.
So.
There we are. With our news in New York City, here's John Tucker.
All right, guys, millions of Americans with obesity would be eligible to have popular weight loss drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic covered by Medicare or Medicaid. This is all part of a new rule the Biden administration proposed just this morning. Well, the rule will give millions of people access to weekly injectables that have helped people shed pounds so quickly. Some have labeled them miracle drugs. It would cost taxpayers as much as $35 billion over the next decade. As Sam Fazeli of Bloomberg Intelligence tells us, it may not sit well with the incoming Trump administration.
I think he's skeptical of these drugs, and therefore there is an interesting possibility setting up that once they're in charge, they might reverse this.
A bipartisan coalition of congressional members have lobbied for the drugs to be covered by Medicare, saying it saved the government from spending billions of dollars on treating chronic ailments that stem from obesity. And President-elect Trump has made his first specific threat to curb global trade flows since his election win. Let's get details from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the U.S. will impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods, on top of all existing levies, beginning his first day in office. And in a separate post, the president-elect said he will impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. Trump framed these new levies as necessary to clamp down on migrants and illegal drugs flowing across borders. And the announcement came just after Trump tapped Scott Bessent to be the next U.S. Treasury Secretary. His selection was viewed as a sign of a more measured stance on tariffs. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
Walmart is joining a growing list of businesses reversing course on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The world's biggest retailer will no longer consider race and gender to boost diversity when granting supplier contracts, and also stop collecting demographic data when assessing financing eligibility. 50,000 flights set to take off nationwide today, the most of this busy holiday week. For drivers this Thanksgiving holiday, AAA says more than 70 million are set to hit the roads. And Target was once known as a place where you went to buy a few essentials, then left with a bunch of junk you didn't need. But the retailer has seen years of disappointing sales. Some are saying Target may have lost its mojo, so they're on the hunt for hit products. One item, do you know anything about this that's been a big success for them? $25 all-in-motion brand leggings. It's helped Target grow its athleisure business by double digits for the past 2 quarters.
You can get 3 of them for the pair, 1 Lulu.
Oh, it's like a Lulu substitution.
Exactly. For $25, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I just
right.
buy them
Thank
so
you,
I can
Rich.
put all the other stuff in. I use it as a bag. You know, you can't. They don't give you bags anymore. We're in New Jersey.
Yeah, for like a couple of years.
Yeah, for a couple of years. So you got to buy something like the leggings.
Will there be a
Put your stuff
tariff on Target? What do you call them?
Leggings.
No, leggings. They're just called leggings.
They're
Target,
called
excuse
All
me.
in Motion brand leggings.
All emotion brand. Will there be a tariff on those, Lisa?
I hope not.
I don't know where they're made. Wait, does it say where they're made? No, it doesn't say.
No, they never say that. Traffic got a huge response on YouTube. Thank you on a live chat. Victoria being cheerful. She's doing Chamber of Commerce for Houston, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
8th worst traffic in America. Thank you, Culture Map. Houston, time lost 62 hours per year. New York City, the worst.
Of course.
40% pop. New York City, 101 hours.
Yeah, that's about
62 hours lost Houston, 101 hours lost New York City. We go to John
that's
Tucker.
how we do it.
Which, did you remember the 101th hour, John?
The leaving Giant Stadium, because like a good fan, I stayed for the whole thing. It took me 3 days to get home. I was stuck on Route 3 for easily like 90 minutes.
Well planned. We thank the New Jersey Transport for that. For those of you nationwide, may you never be stuck in traffic like John Tucker. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mix, and this is after a roller coaster session triggered by President-elect Donald Trump's first specific threats to limit global trading. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.3%. We have Dow futures down 0.3%. S&P futures up 0.2%. Now, Deutsche Bank actually predicted the S&P 500 set to hit 7,000 by the end of next year. We head over to the bond market. The 2-year yield 4.24%, down 2 basis points. We have the yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. Two currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, little change. We have the Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin falling down 1.5% at around 92,000. Few companies making news. Qualcomm, sources saying its takeover interest in Intel, it has cooled. Now, meanwhile, Intel, it secured $7.9 billion in U.S. federal chip grants. It sounds good, but that was actually $635 million less than an earlier proposal. And shares of Rivian, they're higher. They're up about 8%. It won preliminary approval of a $6.6 billion federal loan to support the construction of an EV plant over in Georgia. And finally, Tesla's EVs, they could be shut out from a consumer rebate. It's under a proposal by California Governor Gavin Newsom. He's pushing to offer rebates to EV buyers if a federal subsidy is repealed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us now, Daniel Tannenbaum, partner Oliver Wyman, and truly expert on global anti-financial crime practice and sanctions and all. We just get a year-end update here. Reuters had a report, Business Insider picked it up, and basically you can't do trade through big banks anymore with Russia and China. So there's all these underground things happening. Are we delusional in America that we can limit underground paths of sanctions with Russia and China?
Like any other bad actor, you stop one flow of funds, they're going to find another.
Money brokers, crypto, whatever.
I don't know if it's crypto. A lot of it still may be traditional banks. 2/3 of the world still trades with Russia. So there's a lot of planet out there that's continuing to not pick a side, essentially, in the conflict over Ukraine.
So when we think about sanctions, I guess my question is, because we see them all the time, and the most recent wave was against Russia as it relates to Ukraine. By and large, do they work?
So they're certainly having an impact. I think back a few weeks ago when the BRICS meeting was going on in Kazan, the same week as the IMF World Bank annual meeting, they told the attendees to bring cash because their cards wouldn't work. We're hearing reports of Russian consumers' cards not being able to work in certain countries around the world. They do work. The challenge is because the West is still buying so much from them, uranium, oil, LNG, that it makes it challenging to truly cut them off. But what happened on Thursday was a package out of the Biden administration that sanctioned 50 Russian banks, including the main bank that was financing oil trade. So we've essentially embargoed Russian oil. You can buy it, but basically good luck paying for it.
So Russian oil is a perfect example. I mean, that is such a big part of their revenue stream. And if you sanction oil, I thought initially when it was first announced it would have a big impact on their economy. But apparently not so much. The oil is still getting out. They're still receiving revenue for it. And I don't know where you go from there.
I think the challenge that we're seeing with Russia, and where certainly the Biden administration in concert with the UK and EU have been calibrating, is because there's still goods that are needing to be purchased from Russia, of not overdoing the sanctions. I think what you're going to see in the next few weeks, the last few weeks of the Biden administration, is a lot more significant actions. There's not been a lot of examples made of third countries that have been on the wrong side of this agenda. I think we may begin to see that before Biden leaves office.
And then what do we see in February from the Trump administration?
I mean, this is the one area that...
Wait, have you been asked to visit Mar-a-Lago? Are they going to bring Tannenbaum in to ride herd?
I have been to Mar-a-Lago before, but it's been a minute.
Was the food good?
The food was fine. Okay. I mean, I'm not making a pilgrimage anytime soon.
What are we going to see out of Trump February?
Well, that's the question. Other than the speech at the Economic Club of New York with Raj Cohen asking a specific question on sanctions, we really haven't heard much from President-elect Trump on sanctions. We know what he did last time. We know that Secretary Mnuchin was a huge proponent. The Secretary-designee Bessent, we've really not heard anything on this topic. They will form a key part of the foreign policy agenda, but what they actually look like is a bit of a question at this point.
How about China? Is there a consensus in your world of corruption, anti-corruption, of how to deal with China going forward? Is it better to engage with China, or is it better to just try to take the heavy hand?
I mean, I think China has been known to continue to buy Iranian oil on the wrong side of a Western sanctions coalition. They've continued to provide material support to Russia, and they've suffered no real consequences. I think everyone's kind of acting like see no evil, hear no evil on this issue because it is a tough country to contain. The tariff strategy will be an interesting one because China's learned to fight back in the 4 years since Trump left office. They will retaliate against Western interests in a way that will be more impactful than the last term.
A program note: in less than 1 hour, we are honored to bring you the definitive expert on free trade. Douglas Irwin of Dartmouth College, on short notice, has agreed to join us. His book, Against the Tide, not 30 years ago, but was absolutely definitive read for anybody in the game. Dan Tannenbaum, the conclusion of Doug Irwin's book, The Past and Future of Free Trade. Is free trade dead? Uruguay, WTO, and all the rest? Multilateral, is it done?
Well, I mean, that is the question. Trump renegotiated NAFTA with USMCA and then announced tariffs last night on Mexico and Canada. So it does kind of raise a question of what that means from a free trade standpoint. I do think it will be interesting to see how far the tariff agenda goes this time, as I think more Americans are beginning to realize, well, wait a minute, we pay those tariffs. It's not that China is paying these tariffs. The goods cost goes up, the cost gets passed to consumers. But is free trade over? I mean, we have to see what the new administration team actually does as they get on board.
Tariffs in and of themselves, I mean, do you expect them to be used as more bargaining chips for other issues, whether it's migration or illegal drugs coming in, or is it a real part of the policy, do you think?
Well, I mean, you heard what the nominee for Secretary of Treasury has said on tariffs, that this is a long-term strategy. And then the president-elect last night decides to announce like an immediate move on day one, which I'm not even sure he can legally do for some of these issues. So making these announcements 2 months before you're in power is certainly signaling that you're ready to begin negotiating, because he's not in office yet.
So what do you expect in the first 100 days, I guess, on some of these issues? Because that's kind of when you get stuff done.
Lack of sleep, reading Twitter a lot more again, and Truth Social. That is a bit of the question. There hasn't been If we look back in the prior administration, there wasn't exactly a clear path of strategy on foreign policy. Certainly, the biggest issues are kind of Israel, Gaza,
Right.
Russia, Ukraine, and what to do about China. It really is unclear. I think the escalation path will really drive where the Trump administration focuses first. But I think it's hard to really tell at this point.
1 minute left. Dan Tannenbaum, does the Trump administration, does the president-elect need Lighthizer to return to the administration?
Does he need Lighthizer? I mean, it would be helpful certainly to have experienced hands back at the helm of the administration. What we've not really seen is kind of the layer beneath the cabinet secretary appointees rolled out yet. So until you see those working level, well, not that they're working level, until you see those folks and who they're thinking, it is kind of hard to tell directionally where we're headed. Bessent was certainly a good sign, but I do think Lighthizer is a trusted hand in this space.
Dan, thanks so much. Daniel Tannenbaum with Oliver Wyman here, an update here. And of course, on this day, as John Tucker is head with news on potential tariffs from the Trump administration as well. Red and green is green. I'm going to say it's a massive churn this morning. Dollar flattish. The euro's trying to get to a 104 handle, 105.07, 1.0507 there. Sterling 125.88 is well. Out of the Bronx, we're doing girl bands today. We did, leader of the pack earlier. Out of the Bronx, James Monroe High School, like Kennedy was president, and then LBJ, the Chiffons, they just right away, boom, hit it big.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Donald Trump needs a weak dollar.
Have we achieved the soft landing? Has the Fed kind of done its job?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr on assignment with the Detroit Lions. Lisa Mateo with us as well. Ready for Moana 2 coming out tomorrow. What do we see? We see a wait till 8:30 tomorrow morning. Huge sets of economic data coming out. Our focus today, equity markets. Thank you, Sam Stovall, for getting us started. Liz-Ann Saunders with us with Charles Schwab in a moment. Paul, the sun came up today. I had it here like 6:37 a.m.
Really?
The cloud, look at it outside. It's like nighttime.
Exactly. It's dark out there. So we'll have to see here. But, I mean, you're right, Tom. Tomorrow, big economic data. I'm going to be focusing on the core PCE data because I've been told that's what the Fed looks at here when it tries to gauge its fight against inflation, Tom.
Turn to the market now. We're going to reassess. I love with Amy Wu Silverman.
Yes.
ATH.
ATH.
Liz-Ann Saunders taught me
high.
that.
Yep.
She sat there, we were having a beverage. She said, Tom, ATH.
Okay.
All-time high. We'll get
how
to
you
that
do
in a moment. Good morning on your commute across the nation. Many of you now sliding into massive YouTube work at your home, at your office, on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. That's the best way to see Lisa Mateo. From our Interactive Broker Studios with the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures mix, and this despite President-elect Donald Trump's threatening an additional 10% tariffs on goods from China, 25% on all products from Canada and Mexico. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 68 points. We have Dow futures down 0.2%, 130 points. S&P futures rising 0.2%, or 13 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.25%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up 0.1%. We have the Japanese yen stronger at 153.52 against the dollar. The euro, the British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 1.5% at just about 92,000. To earnings we go. It's all about Kohl's. Their shares down 18%. Weakness in apparel, footwear, that pushed it to trim its full-year sales outlook. Then you have Dick's Sporting Goods. They had better news. That was thanks to strong demand for sports gear, raised its full-year sales outlook. Its shares up more than 9%. Then on the flip side, you have Best Buy cut its full-year guidance down 2%. They say demand slowed for electronics and other appliances. And some changes at Subway. This just coming in. Its chief executive, John Chidsey, retiring from the retired restaurant giant at the end of the year. He's actually led the company since 2019. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Is it because of Jersey Mike's?
I don't know. You know what? Subway has the most stores of any fast food restaurant globally. I did not know that. I thought it would have been McDonald's.
Jollibee.
I don't know.
The Filipino racket.
Tom, you call out YouTube a lot. I'm just looking at on the Bloomberg terminal, the FA function. YouTube advertising, $35 billion this year, $40 billion next year.
We get our fair share of that.
That is unbelievable how big of a business that is.
Comes
Good
in
friends
as
of
well.
YouTube.
What you do, and this is, she's the queen of bullet points. Excuse me, Liz-Ann Saunders, out with not like a year forward look, but a bullet point view here. Liz-Ann Saunders, I was talking to the derivatives expert, Amy Wu Silverman, about ATH. What does all-time high do to how we invest?
Well, it certainly works through the psychological channels, especially for individual investors, and I think it helps drive some of the momentum. But we also have to look at what's going on underneath the surface, and that's been a story we've been speaking about and writing about really for the past couple of years, kind of this idea of a tale of two markets, or maybe what Michael Keene used to say about the duck, calm on the surface and paddling like the Dickens underneath. And, over the past year on a year-to-date basis, S&P hasn't even had a 10% correction. We've had, I think a record-breaking number of all-time highs, but the average member within the S&P has had nearly a bear market level maximum drawdown. And it's even more extreme for the NASDAQ. The average member maximum drawdown within the NASDAQ is 47% this year. It's just happened through a lot of rotation and churn under the surface, which you wouldn't necessarily notice if you're only focused on cap-weighted index level gains, where we do sit still at or near all-time highs.
What you just heard, folks, worldwide, and particularly across American exceptionalism, bottle that. What you just heard from Liz-Ann Saunders. Paul, you can be up this, cap-weighted, not cap-weighted, but the internal churning, and you had that huge NASDAQ negative 46% statistic.
Yep. Liz-Ann, so if I just look at SPX up 25% year-to-date, but the equal-weighted S&P 500 up 18%, is that differential? How concerning is that to you? Or is that more in line with what we typically see?
Well, really since the mid-July initial high in the market that then was immediately followed by a correction in the case of the NASDAQ and near so in the case of the S&P 500, that really kicked in a period of better performance in relative terms for equal weight relative to cap weight. And I think that story still has legs. That doesn't mean equal weight's going to outperform cap weight, every week or every month. But I think that there is some momentum and likely will continue to be in this, I guess you would call it a story of broadening out, but it's in the context of what we continue to think will be fierce rotations at the sector level. Sector dispersion is really high. And I think taking an equal weight approach versus, say, taking a, cap weight X some sort of group, X the Magnificent Seven. I think that's a little bit more dangerous an exercise if you're going to completely eliminate some of those mega cap names that are high contribution to cap weighted returns. I think equal weight still gives you exposure there,
Right.
but without that same concentration risk.
So I think we got $7 trillion in cash. Is that the number we're
Yep,
working with?
that works.
Liz Ann Saunders, do we enjoy $8 trillion in cash next year?
When you're in a Fed cutting cycle, we don't know whether we're still in a Fed cutting cycle. I suppose we'll know more at the December meeting. Surprisingly, perhaps, flows tend to continue to be positive into money market funds. So when I hear this sort of cash on the sideline story suggesting that some or a lot of that money sitting in money market funds is some immediate or near-term fuel for the equity market, I'm not so sure about that, especially now given stickiness on the high side across the sort of yield structure. And I think some of that money may have actually come from riskier parts of the market, including equities when interest rates were moving up. And I'm not sure that money quickly moves back into the equity market. So I think at least the money there that's sticky. But I think if the Fed goes into pause mode and we don't see a continuation of this easing cycle, yes, I do think there could be more money that moves into money markets.
Liz Ann, talk to us about kind of your view of the earnings. We're just finishing up this earnings cycle, and we've got a lot of companies, or some companies, providing guidance for the future. Were earnings strong enough to support this market here, or you have some concerns coming out of earnings?
Well, you saw estimates really get cut when you were in the aftermath of second quarter reporting season for third quarter. So we came into third quarter reporting season with an estimate of only 4% growth. We ended up more than doubling that when all was said and done. And that's just the classic example of the bar gets set low and then companies are able to exceed that bar. But you did see downward trend to fourth quarter estimates. There hasn't been much cutting yet for 2025 estimates. I think that's the MO these days of analysts. They're kind of keeping those adjustments closer to the vest in terms of an out time frame. They'll make adjustments to 1 quarter out. What concerns me about 2025 estimates is they're double digit for all 4 quarters, and it assumes record-breaking profit margins. That may be a bit tricky, especially given the uncertainty with regard to tariffs.
2 quick questions. What's your number one factor to study, to analyze into 2025?
Rate of change in terms of profitability factors versus level.
Do you do cash flow as well?
Strong free cash flow, high interest coverage, strong return on equity, those quality factors, I think.
Yeah.
But I think the rate of change versus level is maybe more important this year.
Hot stove league. Kevin Gordon's a free agent. Are you going to bring him back for 2025?
He's not. Of course, I'm bringing him back for 2025.
Good.
Absolutely.
Does it charts? I mean, she's out there. Liz Ann's listening to Led Zeppelin. Gordon's doing all the work.
Yep,
just
exactly.
so you know, that's the way it's
He's a good
working.
young guy.
Liz Ann Saunders, Kevin Gordon, thank you so much. With Charles Schwab, and Ms. Saunders is chief investment strategist there as well. I've said this all morning: red and green in the screen.
Yep.
I mean,
until Lisa gets this market open, that's all we got.
Dow lagging. I mean, Alex Steele walks in and the market goes up.
Pops.
That's the way it is.
Oil.
Bitcoin cratered. Talk about a 10% correction.
Yeah.
92,000.
Sure.
Almost 10%.
I don't
Not
know.
there yet.
It's all over the place.
There it is.
But it is markedly higher since the election. Let's put it that way.
From the lower left to the upper right.
60,000 the day before the election. Boom, we popped right up close to
Good morning,
100.
Dennis Gartman. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
And President-elect Trump delivering his first specific threat to curb global trade flows since the election win. Let's get details from Bloomberg's Gina Cervetti.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the U.S. will impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods on top of all existing levies beginning his first day in office. In a separate post, the president-elect said he will impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. Trump framed these new levies as necessary to clamp down on migrants and illegal drugs flowing across borders. The announcement came just after Trump tapped Scott Bessent to be the next U.S. Treasury Secretary. His selection was viewed as a sign of a more measured stance on tariffs. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
The other major news in Washington coming from Special Counsel Jack Smith. He's moved to dismiss the election obstruction and classified documents cases against President-elect Donald Trump. Bloomberg legal reporter Zoe Tillman says this was inevitable after Election Day.
Jack Smith says he stands fully behind the strength of the case. This is not about the merits, which we still think, were valid and should have moved forward, but that this Justice Department policy on not prosecuting sitting presidents is categorical.
Bloomberg's Zoe Tillman reports U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan granted Smith's motion to dismiss the election case in D.C. As for the classified documents case in Florida, Smith says he'll appeal the dismissal of charges against Trump's two co-defendants, but won't press ahead with a case against Donald Trump. In the Middle East, Israel and Hezbollah may be getting closer to a ceasefire deal. Israel's security cabinet expected to vote on the latest proposal today. And global airfare is set to become more expensive. According to an American Express global business travel forecast, ticket prices will reflect higher costs and lingering supply chain disruptions. Fares on most routes will rise, though the size of the increases will likely vary greatly by region. And finally, Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It started 100 years ago. Did they have balloons?
You remember
I
that,
guess
right?
so. It remains one of the few spectacles that still draws a big audience to broadcast TV. And according to the Wall Street Journal, airing it's going to get more expensive. The paper says NBC, and they've had the broadcast rights since 1953. They're trying to hammer down a new deal with Macy's to keep the event on the network. A new deal will kick in next year with an average annual fee of more than $60 million. Currently, it's $20 million, the current contract.
Wow.
So, by my math, that's triple.
That's triple.
I used to
Is
live
their
on
ad revenue going to triple?
Who
Their ad
knows?
revenue was very nice from that.
Do they take it to streaming?
Sure, everything.
They
Everything
pop
goes.
it over to Peacock and
Peacock.
say, if you want to see the Macy's Day
Sure,
Parade.
absolutely.
I mean, that's what's going to happen.
That's where it's
right?
all going.
That's where it's going.
Yep.
Wednesday night is a great party if you're in the city.
Yes.
77th, across from
Yeah.
the Museum of
West
Natural
Side.
History,
David
where they
Bradshaw.
blow up the balloons.
They blow up the balloons, yeah.
I used to live on 77th.
Used to be able to walk right up to the balloons. Now you can't.
Wicked parties.
Yeah. Damien Sassauer publishes, he stepped aside for Doug Irwin. Doug Irwin of Dartmouth joining us at 9:45. Our conversation of the day. He is truly definitive on free trade. Damien Sassauer publishes moments ago remittances. Ready, Paul? $857 billion is the money sent out of America. Global remittances.
Yep, that's real.
That from D. Sassauer.
In high school, I worked at a place where we did that every week.
We will have to see. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, after the Dow yesterday reached this new record, it was word that new Treasury Secretary pick, futures lost a little bit of that luster. President-elect Donald Trump promises more tariffs, so now we have Dow futures down 0.2%, 114 points. As far as S&P futures, up 0.2%, 17 points. NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, or 92 points. The 2-year yield, 4.25%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.29%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, we have Brent crude up about 0.5% at $73 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,630 an ounce. To currencies, Bloomberg dollar spot index up 0.2%. We have Japanese yen, euro, British pound stronger, and we have Bitcoin down about 1.5% at around 92,000. More earnings, shares of Abercrombie and Fitch. It reported record net sales, but it only matched estimates. Now, at first, it was a big worry for investors. Shares were lower, but now we're seeing this shift. The shares are higher, up about 4%. And warmer weather, well, that means fewer people buying coats. That's bad news for Burlington stores. Their shares down 2%. It said it's going to fall short of estimates for the coming quarter. And shares of PB&J maker J.M. Smucker up more than 6%. Apparently those popular Uncrustables frozen sandwiches, well, they were a big hit. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
I got Uncrustables. I remember these.
They're not allowed in the Mateo.
They're not. I'm shocked. They're still around.
But they're a huge hit. Kids always have them at all the games we go to. That's all these kids eat.
That's all they eat.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the nutritional.
Don't
Smucker's
do it.
Uncrustables peanut butter and grape jelly sandwich, 18 count. That means they can last. Well, keep frozen, thaw and serve. Eat within 8 to 10 hours of defrosting. Smucker's, okay. This is at Costco.
It's a solid
Aisle
American
4.
company there.
You know, you can buy a year's supply, Lisa. Thank you for the health report with Uncrustables here with Lisa Mateo. We have an exciting 40 minutes for you. Douglas Irwin of Dartmouth College will join us. Absolutely definitive on free trade. Kit Juckes will lay out the foreign exchange response to what we've seen in trade. And right now, with a wonderful 60,000 foot from Schroders, Lisa Hornby joins U.S. fixed income as well. Lisa, just simply, I guess if we have tariffs, the economy slows. What does yield do?
Well, there's a lot of assumptions just baked into that one question that the economy slows if we have tariffs. But assuming that that's right, I think if potential growth is lower and the economy is slowing, yields typically tend to come down in that environment. But again, we'd have to re-underwrite a lot of different policies that are moving in different directions over the course of the next year or two.
Lisa, on the credit front here, I've speaking to folks like you who do this stuff for a living, we've been hearing about tight spreads for a long time. Yet I see by far the best yielding fixed income areas have been U.S. corporate high yield and U.S. leverage loan. Both of those indexes are up over 8% this year. People don't seem to mind the credit risk and the tight spreads.
That's a fair comment and something that we've been debating internally for months now. Credit spreads are at the bottom decile, even bottom percentile of their long-term range, which suggests valuations are expensive. On the other side of the coin, you have a tremendous amount of demand thanks to those yields that you referenced. Overseas demand is even starting to pick up again now that the hedging costs are becoming a little bit less onerous. I think on your previous segment, you talked about the money in money markets. We could see some of that as the Fed continues to ease rates, move back into longer dated fixed income markets. So there's a lot of demand. I think the key for us is what's happening with the fundamentals. The fundamentals in the corporate credit market have been pretty solid. I think 2025, we see a bit more of an inflection there. We have started to see interest coverage fall. I think it's the lowest levels that it's been, at least on the investment grade side, since the second quarter of 2021. Leverage has started to tick up. We're seeing more companies focusing on equity shareholder friendly activities, less focus on balance sheet preservation. And we do expect that M&A volumes will pick up in 25. Just putting it all together, valuations expensive, technical strong, fundamentals deteriorating. It does mean that we're going to have to be more focused on issuer selection next year.
At Schroders, when you sit down as a U.S. representative, what do foreigners want? Do they just want the coupon? Are they like Sweeney in the 2-year because they're scared stiff? I mean, what's the body language of foreigners as they consider marginal investment in U.S. full faith and credit?
I think most, this is a big generalization because it's very dependent on region, but I think many are yield focused. So I think that, by the way, that's true in the U.S. market as well, where probably 60% of investors are yield focused investors, yield buyers, not spread buyers. So as multi-sector investors, we look at spreads and say, wow, they're really expensive. How could we buy corporate credit? Many others are looking at saying, I can earn over 5%. That's a great investment. It doesn't matter that spreads are tight.
Paul, that's the smartest thing I've heard in fixed income in ages. In that, forget about all the blah, blah, blah. What's the coupon?
What's the coupon? Am I getting paid here? Lisa, speak about getting paid here. I mean, we've seen new issuance, particularly in the investment grade market, just at record levels. Have you guys been participating in that? Is that something that intrigues you, or you just kind of stay in the secondary market with what you know?
We're very involved in the new issuance market, particularly where there's issuers that, we like the fundamentals, where they're coming with maybe a bit of a new issue concession. I think that's a really important market to stay involved in. And also, just to follow, to see what the demand on the market is like, how new issues are breaking versus where they priced. So yes, we're very involved. We're using that. We have a decent amount of liquidity because spreads are expensive. So we are using new issues to kind of change the book and the composition.
What would happen if Mag 7 did a big bond issuance? How would that be handled? 4 phone calls?
Right now there seems to be so much demand for every issuer that I don't see it as a problem. There's no shortage of demand in corporate fixed income at the moment.
Lisa, thank you. Lisa Hornby, an update there from Schroders, U.S. fixed income. I mean, it's a toxic soup, Paul, to say the least. I mean, what do you do? 2-year, 10-year? Do you buy? You keep mentioning high yield. Do you go out and buy garbage? Without
seen the leverage loan market, which Bloomberg has an index, and the U.S. high yield index, both over 8%, whereas the rest of fixed income is giving you kind of 1 to 3% total return year to date. So the market is definitely rewarded taking some credit risk there.
Yeah. We had a huge response here to Lisa and John Tucker mentioning Uncrustables. Lisa, I knew there was a change. I couldn't remember it in my memory. My children almost died because they had 3 Uncrustables per day. And of course, then it was high fructose corn syrup. And here's Smucker's. They reformulated the Uncrustables in 2017.
Yes.
To replace the high fructose corn syrup with sugar. So they're healthier now. I think that's what that means. I think you got an audible here, Lisa. I think this weekend you got to slide those puppies into the Mateo kitchen.
Well, I'm telling my daughter's trainer, who trains her speed and agility, he told all the kids, you need to eat Uncrustables before you come here.
See?
Like, who is this guy?
It's part of the training regimen.
It's part of the training.
So what do the Mateo kids eat? For these
peanut butter and jelly on whole grain bread.
Yes. They can't wait to go to college.
Exactly.
Red and green on the screen. A little
Yeah, he
more
enlisted
diet.
in the army to get away, probably.
Oh my! Yeah, really. Join the army and get real food. Futures up 12. Red and green on the screen. The VIX comes in 14.45. That's an important here. Again, coming up. What a tandem! This is what surveillance is about.
Yep, bring it.
Kit Juckes and then Douglas Irwin of Dartmouth. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this opening bell report brought to you by JP Morgan Asset Management. Stay informed on today's fastest growing investment vehicle with the new guide to ETFs. Visit jpmorgan.com/ETFs insights to learn more. All right, how is Wall Street going to react to President-elect Donald Trump's first specific threats to limit global trading with tariffs? Since the news, the stocks have really been on this roller coaster ride. Investors also have some more economic data to look through for today. So let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500, up 0.2%, 14 points at 6,001. The Dow down 0.2%, 108 points at 44,628. The Nasdaq up 0.2%, 54 points at 19,109. We head over to the bond market. The 2-year yield 4.26%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up 2 basis points. To commodities, we have Brent crude up about 0.6%, $73 a barrel. WTI crude $69 a barrel. We have spot gold higher at $2,627 an ounce. As far as currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.1%. At the open, checking with a few retailers who reported earnings. Here we go. We'll start with Kohl's down 17%, Best Buy down 7%. We have Dick's Sporting Goods up 3%, and Abercrombie & Fitch up 1%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Surveillance librarian Robert Brockton comes up. This is amazing. In the NFL, and I guess they got some deal with Smuckers, they model out somehow, this is with AI, that they eat 80,000 Uncrustables a year.
Sweet. That's the way you go.
Just to get going.
Sure.
I mean, Lisa's onto something here.
Yeah, I know. I think she needs to get with the program a little bit. That's what
We
I'm
had
saying.
Lisa Hostess pies. I lived on those for 3 years. I knew when I was eating it, it wasn't good for me, but there it was. An important interview now in a solid half hour for Douglas Irwin of Dartmouth College to join us here on trade. And now Kit Juckes on the litmus paper of the global system, the foreign exchange market. Kit, do you model that euro can weaken through 1.00, weaken through parity, and do you see a resilient, stronger dollar?
I see a resilient, stronger dollar, or I see a dollar staying strong. Funny enough, Tom, your last guest kind of summed it up. If you think that spreads are super tight, but people only see the yield, I think the dollar's real effective valuation is super expensive, but the investors only see the yield. I mean, people are, the big excess savings countries are throwing all their money into the higher yielding dollar. The Japanese, the Chinese, the Germans, the Norwegians, the Canadians, they're all flowing, and they're not being put off by the valuation. They're not being put off by the spreads. They see the yield. I look at the valuation. If I were a credit guy, I'd see the spreads. They're not scared.
My radar, Kit Juckes, is all up in the Kit Juckes world, which is to use dollar and foreign exchange as a litmus paper. EM's a little soggy. I'll let you pick your company. Damien with a good note on that this morning. But Kit Juckes, what's the SocGen call for dollar and global FX dynamics, say out 6 months, out 8 months?
I think it's so expensive that I keep on thinking we're going to have a bit of a correction somewhere. It's going to wobble a bit. And I've kept on saying it's going to have a series of little corrections. It won't go back. Other currencies won't get as strong as they used to, but we need to take a pause because I'm bothered by the valuation. And I keep on being surprised. And right now, you look with this aggressive tariff talk to whom some people naturally react by letting their currencies weaken. And you look at the resilience of the U.S. economy over the last few months, and you have to say, I don't think the dollar, I'd love the dollar to cheapen up so I could buy it without worrying about that valuation. And I guess that's what everyone's trying to do. But I think it is. It's very stretched. It doesn't take much to turn it around. But at the moment, today, tomorrow, the rest of this year, I'm not standing in the way of the Trump trade, not for a second.
Kit, what did you make of the recent announcement of Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary nominee? What did the currency markets how did they interpret that?
They thought they were getting an adult in the room in the sense of someone who said, look, we need to have a plan to have 3% growth and a 3% of GDP budget deficit. We need a plan to have targeted tariffs. We need a plan to get economic activity strong, but also get our house in order in terms of our debt levels. So the market heard an adult in the room, but for as long as for a day, and then we'll see. We because this is going to be the piece. It's what actually gets put together in terms of a concrete plan to achieve U.S. goals, and we simply don't know how that's going to play out. At the moment, we're just bouncing off headlines. But I think Mr. Bessent is popular on Wall Street.
Japanese yen pushing up against 154 here, Kit. Where do you think the Bank of Japan goes with their currency?
Well, there's slightly problem because when it got up to 165, they were very scared that it had weakened too much. But when it came rushing back towards 140 really quickly, it was going too fast. So they'd like it to be at 100 in 10 years' time, I think, or something like that, if you see what I mean. They don't want it to go too fast. Right now, it is only reacting to the level of 10-year note yields. So they're a couple of basis points higher right now, and the yen's weakened a little bit. That they would like it to be stable, not getting any weaker, and then they'd like to raise rates a bit, normalize their monetary policy. That would help them, but not rocket. Whether the Treasury market is going to let that happen or not, we'll have to see, because there could still be some bumpy days ahead.
Where is the Juckes trade of the Pacific Rim? If you need to model out a trade right now, is it Aussie against something? Is it yen against something? Dare I say renminbi?
It's yen against the euro for starters, because the valuation's more attractive in that sense. It's probably yen against the New Zealand dollar, but that's got a lot of carry in it that causes me pain. But the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is going to cut rates again sometime about 2 o'clock in the morning my time tomorrow. Certainly the yen is the long side of that trade, but I don't want to give away too much carry. The yuan is just so stable, really, it doesn't move. That it moves very slowly compared to the others.
One of the big movers today, and really since the majority of the year, has been the weakness in the Mexican peso. What accounts for that, and where do you see levels?
Well, I mean, I think it's still vulnerable, but it's just the Trump trade. It's kind of, they've obviously had a shift in their domestic politics, which makes people a little bit nervous. Now you've got a shift in U.S. politics, which makes people a little bit more nervous, and a lot of people have plowed into it. It's another one of those where you keep on thinking it's sold off enough, and you go, oh, don't feel comfortable yet. So I don't think, if you want to buy some pesos, wait till after Christmas. That would be my best guess. Let's get through to the end of the year before we're trying to get bargains. This is the wrong time of year for that.
So, Kit, just looking out there in your world, where do you see the best value, perhaps, over the next 6 to 12 months?
Value, if we thought value in terms of shopping, the cheap currency is the Japanese yen. It's cheap for a reason. They have no interest rates. So, very low interest rates is going to cause them a problem. It's going to be volatile. If you're buying something that everybody's, mad, nuts, crazy for, and so in fashion they can't see straight, you look no further than the US dollar. I don't think you look at any of the European currencies until we get some of the geopolitics out of the way, until we get some of the growth looking a little bit more sensible. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, if you really said, I want value, you'd go to Japan. And if you said, I want growth, you'd go to the dollar.
We like people for their expertise, folks. Yes, and somebody asked, are you efforting Javier Blas on olive oil? We are efforting Javier Blas out of London on Spanish olive oil. We go to Kit Juckes with his knowledge of Spain on the shock of 2024, the boom in the Spanish economy, even with the horrific floods in Valencia. Kit Juckes, why is Spain leading Europe in economic vitality?
I think partly because the strong bits of the global economy are the service sector driven ones, the tourism driven ones, where people can spend their money. Also to the rest of Europe, frankly, this is a younger nation. It's not got massive excess savings. It's more dynamic, and so it can grow. If you go looking up further the north, where the problem is aging populations with lots of savings, not enough desire to spend them, old industries. The Spanish look they look much happier than that, and now that they've had one big hiccup, but they'll just go back and rebuild. So they'll keep on going.
Kit Juckes, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning with SocGen. Coming up, Doug Irwin of Dartmouth with our news in New York City. John Tucker.
All right, guys. President-elect Donald Trump vowing those additional tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. Shaking up markets with his first specific threats to the U.S.'s top trading partner since his election win. Trump saying he'd impose additional 10% tariffs on goods from China, 25% tariffs on all products from Mexico and Canada. This came in post to his Truth Social network. Plenty of reaction to the tariff plans. Jennifer Hillman is the former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative.
I think, again, you can expect this to be very, very transactional. And I think that's part of the reason for announcing it well before he's even in office. I mean, he is clearly looking for, and I would say, Canada and Mexico to come to him with offers of things that they can do.
Former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative Jennifer Hillman there. The Biden administration proposing a rule that would require the U.S. government to cover weight loss drugs. Let's get more on this story this morning from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
The new rule would give an estimated 3.4 million older Americans on Medicare and 4 million more adults in Medicaid programs for the poor access to weight loss treatment, according to the White House. The proposal would slash out-of-pocket costs by as much as 95% for the drugs that can carry a price tag of $1,000 a month. Medicare, which provides coverage to about 52 million older Americans, currently doesn't pay for related drugs like Wegovy and Zepbound for obesity. And just 13 state Medicaid programs cover the blockbuster weight loss medications. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
Republican lawmakers calling on the Biden administration to preserve documents related to the proposed sale of U.S. steel to Nippon Steel. They're expressing serious concerns that politics have tainted an ongoing national security review of the deal, raising the prospect of a congressional probe. The GOP letter suggests that the political firestorm over the proposed sale of an iconic American firm is unlikely to subside, even with President Biden signaling opposition to the deal and President-elect Trump pledging to block it. Brothers Eric and Lyle Menendez were hoping for a December hearing to plead for their release after serving 35 years for the 1989 murders of their parents. Now the next hearing in Los Angeles is scheduled for late January, so it could be a lot of months before the brothers could be released. Newly submitted evidence by their attorney that he says corroborates the brothers' long-standing claim that they were sexually abused by their father. Lots of people heading to the airport. Many Spirit Airlines ticket holders have been worried about whether they're going to make it to their destination. Spirit, of course, filed for bankruptcy last week. It's important to know that the airline is not shutting down. They say they're reorganizing. Spirit says passengers can use all tickets, credits, and loyalty points as if nothing happened. This one from Axios. Going on a walk after eating can be good for your health. Something you want to keep in mind if you're going to pick out on Thanksgiving. Why it matters. Walking after a meal gets your bowels moving, which can reduce bloating and acid reflux and potentially help prevent type 2 diabetes, according to experts at the University of Washington. Nice long walk.
See, when Michael Barr's here, we don't do these stores. Lisa's loving this. You're over there.
Not in a way.
Did you guys?
I'm going to put my Target leggings on and go for a nice walk.
Did you go like
dinner.
after Thanksgiving, Lisa? Did you go for like a 10-mile hike?
No, but we go for walks after dinner. We do. Got to do it. Come on, Tom
All
Keene.
right.
You got to be walking the streets of New York City.
Depends what
Yeah.
dinner is. If dinner's before the Detroit Lions,
Well, okay.
you go to see the Detroit Lions. Afterwards, you go see the Cowboys, I think it is. And you mentioned Texas A&M.
7:30 Saturday night. That'll be a big game, especially for the good folks down in Texas. So that'll be good. Jess Menton, Texas A&M Aggie alum.
She's on?
No, but she'll be all fired up. She'll find the Texas A&M bar in New York City, wherever that
there's
is.
2 or 3.
Yeah,
yes.
she'll find that.
Joe
That's
Weisenthal may go.
for
He's
UT.
been,
Yep,
been
big
hitting all
UT
the big
guy.
places.
Yep.
Go down there as well. Right now, an odd tape here, to say the least. NASDAQ up 0.4%. SPX up 0.2%. The Dow negative 0.4%. Coal's not a Dow component, is it? I don't think so.
No, but I mean, what's leading me down there is Amgen is accounting for about 200 points of the Dow 200 points.
Coming up, Douglas Irwin of Dartmouth for Global Wall Street, without question, our conversation of the day. Dollar, Kitchuk's lifting the dollar stronger from New York City. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks mixed. Traders try and look past President-elect Donald Trump's plan to impose additional tariffs on the nation's top trading partners. We have shares of General Motors and Ford. They are both lower. General Motors down 7%, Ford down 2%. Both automakers manufacture in Canada and Mexico and also import cars to the U.S. from China. We have the NASDAQ down 0.5%, 102 points. The Dow down 0.4%, 219 points. The S&P 500 up 0.2%, or 12 points. The 2-year yield at 4.26%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 4.29%, and that's up about 2 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index up about 0.2%. We have the Japanese yen, euro, and British pound stronger. Bitcoin down about 0.5% right now at 93,000. Shares of Amgen, Paul mentioned it. Yeah, down 9%. It was down as much as 11% at the open. That was the biggest drop since October 2016. The reason why? It's experimental obesity shot. It only helped patients lose up to 20% of their body weight. It was a trial study. Investors were hoping for some better results and also fewer side effects. And shares of Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, they are on the rise this morning. Word that the Biden administration proposing this new rule that would cover weight loss drugs under Medicare and Medicaid. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. The path here of trade and of thinking of America internationally at Columbia goes from Charles Kindleberger, through a wonderful gentleman who is hugely supportive, now at 90 years old, Jagdish Bhagwati of Columbia. And he had a student in 1988, Douglas Irwin, who received parchment from Columbia, and literally in 6 or 7 years wrote the absolute definitive book on free trade. You bought, Paul, people bought Against the Tide hardcover just to look cool. They never read it. But you just read 300 pages on free trade from Douglas Irwin, now at Dartmouth College, an institution there, and it was definitive. In this time of tariffs, of free trade, of a new policy, we speak with Professor Irwin, French professor at Dartmouth. Doug, thank you so much for joining us on short notice. Is free trade dead, or is free trade threatened?
It's threatened, but it's certainly not dead. And that's because the economic benefits are so overwhelming. Even countries such as the United States that are speaking against it recognize there's only so much you can squeeze it out, because it's really important and it's really essential for people's standard of living and how economies grow in the future.
William Klein at the Peterson Institute, along with what you've written about, is that we look at it as bilateral. I would respectfully suggest the president-elect is very much U.S. China, U.S. Russia, etc. But the leakages of policy means, what does it mean for Vietnam? What does it mean for Argentina? What does it mean for Poland? Do we underestimate the complexity of instituting tariffs?
Oh, absolutely, because they have ripple effects today that they didn't have 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, before global supply chains had really been a part of the world economy. So we're just much more integrated with so many different countries around the world for different components and parts, all manufacturers source globally. And it's not just from one country. So the old trade of 50 years ago or so, where you'd produce a final good and trade a final good, that's not the way things are done anymore. It's really this interwoven mesh of intermediate goods, components, raw materials, and it's just incredibly complex. And so when you hit one country like China, you divert a lot of trade to Vietnam or Mexico or a lot of other countries, and then you become sort of a whack-a-mole. Vietnam is on the radar screen of the Trump administration. So if we hit Vietnam with higher tariffs, well, are things going to go to Cambodia, Malaysia? We don't know. But there are always these ripple effects and these ricochet effects.
So, Doug, just from a policy perspective, are tariffs, are they effective, totally non-effective? How do you think about them?
Well, it really depends on the objective that you're trying to achieve with them. And one of the issues with the Trump administration, both in his first term and coming in, is that there's so many different objectives that he wants to achieve with the tariff. He thinks it's a beautiful word and it accomplishes so much. Is the main goal to raise revenue? Is the main goal to bring back jobs and manufacturers here? Is the main goal to punish other countries and adversaries and decouple from them? Is the main goal to affect their behavior and change their behavior in certain ways? So we have to sort of ask, what is the ultimate goal of using tariffs to achieve certain objectives? And I think it's maybe, is maybe underrated in the past by past administrations in terms of what they might be able to achieve. But I think President Trump and President-elect Trump sort of overstated what we can accomplish by imposing higher tariffs on countries. We are integrated, but the U.S. isn't necessarily the biggest player in the world as much anymore.
Right.
Teddy Roosevelt used to say, speak softly and carry a big stick. I think President Trump speaks very loudly, and we have a smaller stick than we believe.
Interesting. So, I mean, have we seen peak globalization, Doug?
If you look at the numbers and the data, just in terms of merchandise trade, after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, we've sort of topped off. That has not been growing the way it had been over the previous 2 decades or so, when we had this explosion of globalization starting in the 1980s. But that doesn't mean it's sort of over, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's peak. Services trade continues to rise. Digital trade continues to rise. Investment flows are down a little bit from past peaks. But globalization is sort of, hit a ceiling to some extent, but it's certainly not retreating very much.
Douglas Irwin, help us here with some mathiness, which is the nonlinearity, the magnitude of a tariff. If we get Uruguay, GATT, all the other good news of the past, we got tariffs down 2, 3, 4, 5%. We hear numbers, all of us, our listeners and viewers hear 25%, 40%, Paul, 60% even talked about. Professor Irwin, describe the impact to the people listening and on this show of the magnitude growth of that statistic. What happens at 20% versus 40% tariff?
That's a great question. So, President Trump has talked about a lot of different tariffs. It used to be a 10% across the board, maybe 20%, and as you said, going up to 60% on China. If it's a 10% tariff, exchange rates fluctuate quite a bit. Even though there's pricing in dollars, a 10% tariff probably would have just small ripple effects. But if we're talking 20% or 60% on China, that's really a game changer. So a lot depends on what gets into that tariff category. If you're sipping your morning coffee or you have your morning tea or eat your bananas in the morning, those are not subject to any import duties at all. So boom, we're going to have a 20% tax on those. And then, of course, 60% on China. Tim Cook and Apple were able to get away from the tariffs before, but all of a sudden iPhones, iPads, Apple's really going to have to rethink things if there's a 60% tariff on all goods coming from China.
Quickly, Doug Irwin, if Robert Lighthizer was here, he grew up in northeastern Ohio. He saw his town decimated by free trade, decimated by globalization, the story we all know. If you were sitting with Robert Lighthizer and he advises the president, what can you take from Lighthizer theory that could benefit the nation?
Well, unfortunately, I think not too much. I guess I would say two things. First of all, Ohio is not the U.S. economy writ large. The South has attracted a lot of manufacturing precisely because of the high-tax, anti-business attitudes of the Rust Belt states. And they've got to rethink how they compete and how they position themselves vis-a-vis other U.S. states, not relative to the rest of the world as well. And second of all, tariffs, which he's very much in favor of, are a very blunt instrument. They might help out certain steel producers in Ohio, but they have negative effects on steel manufacturers or manufacturers that use steel components elsewhere in the country. So it doesn't help out manufacturing overall. There's always a trade-off. You're going to hurt some and help others. And you got to be aware that, yes, you might want to help out those Ohio steel workers, but you have to worry about auto workers elsewhere, too, when their costs go up when you put on steel tariffs.
Doug, Professor Blanchflower says you're slacking off. We need a new Against the Tide. Get that puppy out. We need that. Talk to Princeton University Press. We need an updated Against the Tide. Douglas Irwin, Dartmouth College there on free trade. Beginning of the debate, I'm sure we'll have Professor Irwin on as we slip into 2025. Got a big response. We did leader of the pack.
Yep.
He's so fine with chiffons. And then one day somebody showed up, and I have the clearest memory, Paul, of being shocked by the Pointer Sisters.
Really?
It was like a whole different sound. It was like, boom, there they were, the Pointer Sisters. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney, Bitcoin, craters. They do that next.